I'd like to welcome everyone to our city council meeting. Call the meeting to order. Madam City Clerk, are we all here? And everything posted?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. The agenda was posted in accordance with the Nevada Open Meeting Law, and all members are present.
Thank you very much. And we'll all stand now for the invocation, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance. Pastor Todd Kent, not Clark, will offer the prayer and representing the Calvary Chapel, Boulder City Church, and all of us. Thank you, Pastor.
Gracious Heavenly Father, we come before you this evening, recognizing, Lord, that our wisdom is not enough, that we need your wisdom, that's an eternal wisdom. Lord, you told us that if we would seek your wisdom, you would give generously and without reproach. Lord, I'm reminded in the book of Esther, Lord, that when your people were going to be destroyed, you had set in place Esther. And Mordecai reminded her, Lord, that he had placed her in such a place as that for such a time as this. And God, I just thank you that you placed the mayor and the city council here for such a time as this, and ask, Lord, that they would act in your wisdom, with your understanding, Lord, not only for their benefit, Lord, but for the benefit of all people, that we might live peaceably, and Lord, that we might live in a way that honors you and pleases you. These things I pray in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. Thank you. If you would all join us with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. In accordance with the agenda, we will have public announcement before the public comment. If you're going to have a public comment and want to call in, that number will be 702-589-9629.
Mayor,
Go ahead.
are you going to open public announcements before public comment?
Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah, I was just hoping that someone could call if they wanted to, but we're going to just do it the way you like. Yes, ma'am. So I have a public announcement. The City of Boulder City has made available city land to the Boulder Rifle and Pistol Club since 1961 to operate a shooting range. The city currently provides this land via lease for the price of $1 per year. In exchange, the lease requires that the membership fee for Boulder City residents is limited to $125 to join and $75 for renewal, or $10 per 2 hours of use for non-members. In addition, the club is required to hold events open to participation from the residents of Boulder City who are not members. The spirit of this lease is primarily to provide a recreational benefit for Boulder City residents. We, of course, welcome members from all over, but Boulder City residents primarily should be managing and enjoying this resource that is provided by the city. The board of the Boulder City Rifle and Pistol Club is currently seeking 4 new members, and I am encouraging our resident club members to apply to serve on the board. According to the bylaws, the vacancies may be filled by a majority vote by ballot of the members of the Boulder City Rifle and Pistol Club in good standing present at a special meeting of the club. Each candidate for director shall have been a member of the National Rifle Association for at least 2 years, also a member of the Boulder Rifle Pistol Club, Incorporated, or its predecessor, the Boulder Rifle and Pistol Club, for at least 2 years. The election will be held at a special meeting scheduled for Saturday, September 16th, 2023 at 1 p.m. at the Boulder City Rifle Club, or will that be at the Smith Building.
It should have I believe it's at the Rifle Club. It should have the place there.
Okay,
I believe it'll be at the Rifle Club on September 16th at 1 p.m.
thank you. So it will be at the Rifle Range Classroom. Members qualified and interested in serving may nominate themselves by attending this meeting and indicating their interest in serving on the board. Are there any other public announcements? Seeing none,
No
we
one
will
else
go
signed up.
to public comment and open the mic for public comment. Anyone here in the audience is welcome to come forward, state your name.
I have comments, but I know there are written comments as well. And it would be great if the written comments came first, because then I can adapt what I'm saying to whatever comes in. Is that a possibility, for the written comments?
We would be happy to accommodate the written comments first. In your case, thank you. Madam City
I would
Clerk?
suggest anybody else that's here, go ahead and provide their comments
Okay,
that's in the audience.
so we will
And then
have,
I can read written, and then she can come back up.
anyone who is here is welcome to come forward and say whatever they would like in public comment. Come forward, identify yourself, and go ahead.
Yeah, Matt Reagan, Boulder City resident. I want to thank you all, first Mayor and Council, first for item 16, which is the airport hangars. A lot of work has gone into this, to get us a hangar lease agreement, and each one of you, I really appreciate all the hard work that's gone into this. But now to address what we're going to be, what's on the agenda item, there's as I understand it, so far has been resolved is the hangar leases that have expired. So now we're going to ask, okay, what are we going to do with the 2023, 24, and I think the 2028? And I'm just throwing this out as a suggestion, is just if we can do that is after, obviously what needs to get resolved first is the hangars that have been expired. They need to get their leases and get that resolved, get new leases, and that's just a administrative thing that's going to happen because that seems like the decisions, most of the decisions have already been made on that. However, it's like, okay, what do we do when in 2028, for instance, do we add, what I suggest is just to tack on 20 years. So that still puts us in that 50-year span that it seems like it's a general consensus that we're going to stay under the 20 years. So everybody gets their 50 years. And likewise, that would be the same as the 2024s and all the rest of them. And that as soon as administratively there's time and people have it, we can start working on the rest of the hangars as far as opening, even have people say, okay, let's open up their leases. For instance, I have a 2028. And I know I speak for a lot of people, or probably almost everybody, that we'd be more than happy just to open up our leases and sign, and so that we would go and, so the leases essentially would just tack on 20 years to after 2028. So if we signed them, for instance, tomorrow or the next day, we would get the remainder of our 2028 and then just add on the 20 years onto the 2028, which would give us, a total of 50 years for all of us. And I thought that, I'm pretty sure I speak for everybody when we do, because we've been working at this for over 4 years now, and you have an idea of exactly where everybody stands on this. And so I thought that, just throwing that as a suggestion. Sure appreciate your help again, and appreciate staff's help as well. They've been great. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else here would like to participate in public comment? Any written public comments or on the phone?
There's several written public comments. The first public comment was submitted by Judy DeShane regarding item 16 on the city council agenda. Why are 15,000 citizens being put on the hook again if the airport fund falls short of funds for necessary maintenance repairs All Boulder City residents will be billed for the shortfall, not just the approximate 150 airplane hangar owners who are getting a sweetheart deal on land leases and get to charge market rates for rent, but don't have to pay anything extra to the city residents. Why don't airplane hangar owners have to live up to the contracts they signed? What makes airplane hangar owners so special and above the ordinary Boulder City residents? Why has there not been a town hall meeting so all residents could get their questions answered and voice their opinions? City council meetings just don't solve the problem on big issues that will affect us for 20 to 30 years. Why is no one mentioning the, I think she means 1,000 to 8,500 4 of the 5 council members received in campaign contributions from some hangar owners? It appears very devious and far from transparency and ethical standards for them to discuss and vote on airport issues when they receive substantial monies from one side only. Why is no one giving us a breakdown of owners outside Boulder City versus Boulder City residents? I understand that 12 of 25 leases on 6-month hold belong to non-Boulder City residents, and 13 are owned by 11 Boulder City residents. One resident owns 3 hangars, so resident count does not match hangar count. Due to laws requiring equal treatment, if we give a deal to Boulder City hangar owners, the deal needs to be offered to all owners. So the only losers are Boulder City residents, are the non-airplane and non-hangar owners. Per Boulder City Review, as of 7/15/2020 council meeting, hangar owners presented their offers and said they just wanted a vote on their offers. The council voted no, and they sued us anyways and lost in court on both sides, and both sides paid their own attorney fees. New rental leases were offered to the current hangar users at the fair market, a rate of $4 per square foot per month, and up to a 5-year renewal in July or August of 2020. I have not heard of many, if any, hangar users leaving the hangars. With a waiting list of 150 plus, I am sure there would not be a problem if the city would do the same with leases that expire in the next 0 to 5 years. The citizens of Boulder City just need a council that thinks of all citizens as being equal and stop favoring only the rich that can afford the planes and the education needed to be a licensed pilot. The giveaways by this council to the rich and powerful through apparent backdoor agreements and meetings are unfair to the average Boulder City resident and need to stop. Next written comment was submitted by Valerie McNay. Dear Mayor Hardy and City Council members, please arrange a town hall meeting where members of our Boulder City community can express their thoughts and recommendations about airport hangar leases. Since the city is considering giving away valuable assets, airport hangars, for 20 to 30 years, taxpayers should have an opportunity to provide input before the leases are signed. City ground leases should be based upon market value according to the city charter. The airport hangars are limited. The city has a waiting list of 182. Each space should have an increase of $300 per month. If current lessees aren't willing to pay, there are plenty who would. The city should be charging at least market value and should be looking at the dollar amount the hangars are being sublet for. In one case, a lessee was subletting a hangar for $900 a month and paying the city $50 a month. Citizens of Boulder City should have a say on allowing subletting. Of the 25 leases due to expire, 12 are not Boulder City residents. Boulder City citizens should have a voice regarding allowing non-Boulder City residents to lease our valuable airport space at a low cost and should consider limiting lessees to 1 hangar space. We need a town hall meeting where members of the public can express their thoughts. 4 members of the City Council received contributions from pilots at Boulder City Airport from Save the Boulder City Airport PAC, from Goodfellow Corp. And Good Sense Corp., so should not have input on the hangar leases. Next comment was submitted by Roseanne Rabioli Mealy. Regarding item number 16 on the agenda, I am speaking as a 28-year resident of Boulder City. One of the first things I recognized back in 1995 was the fact that airport hangar occupants paid very low lease rates. I was even taken to a hangar that was subleased to an individual who did not have a plane in the hangar, but a considerable number of items for which one would rent a storage unit. Having just moved from Chicago to Boulder City, it hit me that something wasn't kosher. Over the years, I have seen again and again the unwillingness of the city to address head-on the issues of why the lease issue, for lack of a better term, continues to be sidestepped. Let's put a Band-Aid here. Have some discussion there, but never examine why lease payments are what they are. At a town hall meeting some time ago, I asked the question, who is the boss? I believe the same question is applicable here. In this case, are leaseholders in charge, or do the residents of Boulder City have some voice in this matter? Why not ask the residents? Next comment was submitted by Arthur Swanson. The proposed airport hangar plan benefits a small number of people at a significant cost to Boulder City residents. The land was high value and the rates proposed are substantially below market value. The city council has given away millions of dollars to former city employees and now is considering throwing away more money. There is no reason to subsidize the leases with these rates. Thank you. The next comment was provided by Lois Donat, and hers is regarding item number 2B, resolution number 7685. I believe Mayor Joe Hardy should recuse himself from voting on consent agenda item 2B, resolution 7685, a resolution of the City Council of Boulder City, Nevada, approving agreement awarding a bid to Las Vegas Paving Corporation in the amount of $5,899,572 for work pertaining to reconstruct Taxiway Bravo and electrical improvements project, and amending both the funding and expenditures of the fiscal capital year. NRS 281A.420, requirements regarding disclosure of conflicts of interest and abstention from voting because of certain types of conflicts, effect of abstention on quorum and voting requirements, exceptions. Next comment was submitted by Marty and Ruth Reel. This is regarding agenda item number 16. The City of Boulder City, along with running the city, is in the business of operating 2 golf courses, a utility company, and an airport. The Airport Enterprise Fund expenses for the fiscal year 2023, ending June 30th, 2023, exceeded revenues by $543,132, costing the citizens of Boulder City. We believe the airport hangar lease agreement should be raised to market value. This extra income would offset the cost of running the airport. It seems the only fair and ethical way to do business of the community of Boulder City. The next written comment was submitted by Sharon Newby regarding item number 16. Thank you, Council, for giving me this time to comment. The airport ground lease agreement has been an agenda item for many meetings with much discussion. The city staff has worked on many suggestions of what to charge the hangar leaseholders, trying to be fair. I think the City Council needs to be fair to the residents of Boulder City. Our airport is an asset, one that is more valuable because it is in Boulder City. What is fair market value for ground leases? I heard the lawyer for the hangar owners give a suggestion for the price PSF. I've never heard a representative tell an owner what they should charge for the rent. The airport is a propriety enterprise fund which is self-supporting, and the city is responsible for the following. Maintenance and operating expenses are the city's sole financial responsibility. Examples of maintenance and operating expenses include crack seal, pavement seal coat, gate replacement, access control infrastructure, security cameras, periodic automated weather observing system equipment upgrades, concrete channel maintenance, storm drain cleanouts, washout repairs, weed brush control to maintain the line of sight, parking lot maintenance, and restriping and airfield pavement markings. Administrative functions include customer databases, lease management, aircraft records, research complaint investigation, inspection records, badging and record keeping, grant administration, billing, accounts receivable and paying, FAA, state, and environmental document updating and reporting, and airport regulation document updates. It states the city can fulfill its responsibilities with the average lease rate, but everyone knows prices are increasing exponentially. What happens if we can't pay for all these things? The Boulder City residents are going to have to pay for all the items stated above. Finally, Boulder City residents should have a greater say in these lease agreements since they are for 20 to 30 years. I think we should have a town hall meeting with staff explaining the equitable values and comparables from other airports. Thank you. Next comment was submitted by Nicola Collins. Why is the city council asking people on fixed incomes to subsidize some of the most affluent members of our community? The tenants of our airport hangars were given a sweet deal 30 years ago to help establish our new airport. Their lease is such a great deal that many of them are subletting their hangars for more than 10 times what they pay the city in rent. Obviously, they are reluctant to give up this lucrative opportunity, and they contributed generously to your elections, except for Matt Fox, all of which is a matter of public record. Unfortunately, you have not disclosed these contributions or recused yourself from voting on this issue. The hangar tenants all signed a contract with the city and were well aware that after 30 years, the hangars would revert to the city and they would be charged market prices to continue the leases. There are over 180 people on a waiting list to lease a hangar at our airport who are willing to pay these prices. Let's have a town hall, and maybe you can explain why hangar tenants, many of whom do not even live in Boulder City, should be offered these long-term contracts, 20 years, below market value. Nevada revised statutes and our own city charter compel you to lease the hangars at market value, not to mention the FAA, who provides funds for improvements at our airport. You already have a bizarre record of paying out huge settlements to people who were losing their court cases with the city. It does seem a bit tone-deaf to be raising our utility rates while subsidizing people who own airplanes. I urge all of you who receive campaign contributions from hangar tenants to recuse yourself from voting on this matter and to protect the public purse by charging full market value for these long-term leases. Next comment was submitted by Linda Hyman. Whether this is corruption, the conflicts of interest, or the appearance as such, one must ask the question, what is best for Boulder City, not what is best for the few affluent people reaping the benefits. This is a business that brings revenue back to the city and should be the driving factor in determining how it can be and will properly be managed. There is a waiting list for these hangars. Either we get the highest bids or at very least get fair market value for them. Open the availability up to those who didn't pay for the candidate's campaign to ensure favorable and biased outcomes. Hangars should be offered to Boulder City residents first. There should only be one hangar made available per qualifying person per plane, not 3 to 1 person that would be subletting out as a profit for themselves. Boulder City should be the beneficiary. I strongly suggest a town hall meeting be held to discuss these issues before the contract is signed. I would hope the members of our city council understand the importance of the goal here, which is what is most beneficial for Boulder City and its residents. The next public comment was provided by Fred Volz. While there is no question city staff, city council, and the hangar ground lessees all have competing visions of the appropriate way to proceed with new ground leases, there are some fundamental problems with the convoluted methodology and objectives in today's packet. The assignment and sublease terms seem appropriate, but still financially unfair to Boulder City taxpayers by allowing the hangar lessees to generate revenue that should be going to the airport fund. As an enterprise fund, the Boulder City Airport needs to generate enough revenue to pay its day-to-day operating expenses and contribute its pro rata portion of capital improvements, despite the 90% federal taxpayer match for many of the capital projects. It has struggled to do so over many years. Unfortunately, the airport generates little other revenue but for its hangar ground leases, since it does not charge takeoff and landing fees, and its minimal fuel sales have been marred by one controversy after another. Boulder City needs to accelerate the permitting of new ground lease spaces at its airport. Perhaps most concerning is the inability or unwillingness to price ground leases based on local competition, which consists only of North Las Vegas Airport and Henderson Executive Airport. There are no de novo hangar ground leases currently available at either airport, with at least a 2-year wait at North Las Vegas and an unknown wait at Henderson Executive. One sublet at the Henderson Executive Airport would cost the subleasee over $2 per square foot per month. The lowest price sublet at the North Las Vegas Airport is $1,000 per month, offered on a month-to-month basis. We have seen the same dynamic of scarce hangar availability here in Boulder City, where there is reputed to be a 180-person waiting list for 111 hangars. A private plane is not an RV that can be parked to the side or behind a house or deposited at a self-storage facility. The basic economic concept of supply and demand may have escaped 3 of the 5 of you who have been either government or large institution employees and concerned with generating enough revenue to continue a given operation. There are few airport competitors in Greater Las Vegas, giving the existing lessees a continued sweetheart deal regardless of the percentage increase from a ridiculously low existing rental rate unfairly benefits a small subsection of the population. Such an approach is detrimental to most Boulder City residents' best economic interest because they receive no direct benefit from below market rental rates. Boulder City's competitors would be only the 2 local general aviation airports, not small airports in some remote part of the U.S. Those 2 are the only rental rates Boulder City should be using to set its own rental rates. Based on those realities, no hangar lessees should be initially paying less than $1 per square foot per month in base rent if they choose to renew their ground leases for the 10-year initial periods and a 10-year renewal option with appropriate CPI bumps. Finally, it is concerning that the present lessees' interests and desires have been given an inordinate amount of consideration by City Council, especially when many thousands of dollars in campaign contributions have been given by them to 4 out of 5 council members in their most recent campaigns. At the last council meeting, it was stated that attorneys and the State Ethics Commission saw no problem with council member relationships to the airport beneficiaries if they were publicly disclosed. What about campaign contributions which were not disclosed? The appearance of impropriety and favoritism is often just as important as reality. We have several recent examples of these problems at the state and federal level. In an abundance of caution, recusal from decisions where influence appears to have been brought is the prudent course. We have also seen a similar problem in specious settlements lacking public discussion of over $2 million in claims the city had previously won at every step of the appellant process. That concludes my written public comments.
Any on the phone? Thank you. Please come forward, state your name.
I'm Pat Murphy, and I don't know how to work a microphone, apparently. I wanted to, I spent the last day watching both council meetings about this topic before coming to talk to you, and I respect you all for being on the council. I was listening to it at double speed sometimes and going, okay, what are we talking about now? Anyway, I wanted to acknowledge the hangar owners and pilots who came and spoke to the council because I thought it was really helpful to get their perspective. I got an idea why they were upset, and it's hard when there's changes in a place that you think of as your own. I was a little surprised that they were surprised because any tenant knows that when a lease expires, things change, and it also was in many of their leases. But, you know, it sounds like there were a lot of communication problems. Communication problems between the council and the hangar owners and the staff. And communication problems are never good. They always end up making trouble. And as I watched videos of the last 2 meetings, what bothered me more than the past communication problems was the sense that the communication problems are continuing. And I'm saying continuing, up to this minute. The pilots asked some good questions like, why can't Boulder City run its airport as cheaply as the comparable airports? And Matt Reagan said, I'm channeling you, Matt Reagan. Matt Reagan said, something has happened in the last 10 years that caused this Boulder City airport to be so expensive that we have to increase our lease rates to cover our costs. Now, in both cases, the implication was the staff was at fault. That was a staff problem. It's not a staff problem. It's a communication problem. Clearly, the channels of communication are not open or being used. I was also really shocked that when Rod Woodbury, the lawyer representing the tenants, said in a slide that the staff was making assertions without providing any backup documentation whatsoever when they said the airport has delayed preventative maintenance due to budget limitations in the past, and when they were when the staff was talking about what the airport needed to be self-sustaining. I'm sorry, that's really disrespectful. I would like, rather than just taking that at face value because Rod Woodbury said it, it's like, okay, we will talk to the staff. We will find out where those comments came from. We will get that backup documentation. You guys are the leadership, and you should be looking to help the communication happen. I was interested in the questions, those questions, you know, why is the airport more expensive than other airports? What has happened in the last 10 years? But I'm not interested in assigning blame. I'm interested in figuring out what's going on, and I think you should be too. I'd like to know what the council can do to ensure that they respect and empower their staff and set up more situations where the staff and community, whether it's the hangar owners or the community at large, can work together to answer questions so you don't have these meetings where it's rancorous and people are upset. Let your staff come up with suggestions for handling the sublease situation, for example, rather than tossing around numbers like, oh, let's charge $250. Well, let's do this. The staff has done research on this. You've got tenants with a whole lot of different leases and situations. Help your staff get the resources they need to sort out the situations, and then listen to your staff and recognize the solutions when they're given to you. So that was, that was not why I was watching the meeting, but I was surprised. I really felt for the staff being dissed, and no one was saying, well, let's figure out how to work this out. And I'd also like to say that it's clear from the other comments that were read that the citizens of Boulder City need clarity on what's going on here. There is a perception that you are working with the wealthy airplane owners rather than with the rest of the city. And if you want there to be a different perception, you're going to have to work for it. I looked at the numbers, and I don't know if, Taylor, you got any message that Pat Murphy called with a question about a typo, because one of the slides said that the rent was 40 cents annually per square foot. And I went, that's got to be a typo, because I'd looked at the other estimates from other airports, and I was going, that must be monthly. And no, I mean, it is annually. And when I do the math, 55 cents annually for a 1,000 square foot facility, that's $550. Well, hey, my storage unit down at the storage unit place, that wouldn't cover 3 months of it. It certainly wouldn't cover a year. So you can see why people are a little like, what? Why are they so low? Anyway, and I'm going to raise the same touchy subject that another number of other people have touched upon, one that relates to perceptions and disclosures. I was surprised that all of the council members did not mention ways in which they have benefited more monetarily from involvement with the airport. Now, Koki, your campaign reports say that you received $8,000, a third of all your campaign contributions came from the Political Action Committee, Save the Boulder City Airport. And I mean, that organization was started by two tenants at the airport who would like the airport not to change. They'd like their rents to stay low. Now, I'm not saying this influences your votes or discussion, but it sure seems like something you should disclose so people know about it. And Mayor Hardy, you received $8,000 in campaign contributions, $4,000 from Save the Boulder City Airport, and $4,000 from Kurt Goodfellow through his company, Good Sense. Again, that doesn't mean, but it means that friends tend to give you campaign contributions, and you're more likely to listen to your friends. You know, so it gives a perception of influence. Sherry, your campaign received $3,000 combined from the PAC and from Kurt Goodfellow. And Steve, you got $1,000 from the Save the Boulder city airport PAC. So the only person who had nothing to disclose is Matt Fox. Good going, Matt. But I kind of, I mean, I hesitated to bring this up, but, and it's embarrassing to be caught in something you should have disclosed, but they really need to be stated. And some people are wonks like me who go check campaign contributions because, you know, I like to know. I kind of believe in the follow the money dictum. And it's like, okay, what's going on? So that's what I've got to say. And but I'd like to leave you with the thought of empower your staff. I mean, you've got a good staff. And if you don't have a good staff, you should get a good staff. But I'm confident that you have hired good people and you should listen to them. Thank you very much for listening.
Go ahead.
Bryn Delormier, and I just wanted to say I think it's clear from 10 people commenting before me that this issue warrants asking all the residents of Boulder City if the airport matter meets that four-way test on your wall right there. And that's really all I had to say. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thomas Memmer, for the record, 1310 Capri Drive. I'm here in capacity as a representative of Teamsters Local 631, urging the council to approve the contract and agenda item 2 for Las Vegas Paving. Las Vegas Paving is a signatory employer with several unions here in Las Vegas, including roughly 200 Teamsters, my members that I represent personally. Las Vegas Paving provides good wages, provides defined benefit plans for health care and retirement options for its workers. This is the type of contractor on public works projects that these projects should be awarded to. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else here would like to have public comment? Anyone on the phone?
No callers on the phone?
And no other written comments?
No.
Thank you. Go ahead, sir.
This is just for any of the agenda items, right? Right on, just to make sure, I wasn't sure. This is in regards to item agenda number 12.
If you could identify
And my name is
yourself.
Kevin Doyle. And I am the pastor of BC Home Church. And it is a pleasure to have you guys serving. So thank you for all that you do for the city. I wanted to come in and speak directly to the idea of the rezoning of the property for the fire station, and to create this fire training station. First of all, so glad that we're actually going to be building that. I think it's a great idea, and really appreciate what Chief Gray is trying to accomplish with our fire department. It's fantastic. I love his ambition to see his teams trained and most prepared for the needs of the city. I think that's really important. I mean, I see guys out at the church, I'm looking out our doors, and I see them in the dirt messing around with stuff and trying to train in some, ways that they can with the property that's there. So that is good, and I am thankful that we can move our fire department forward. I do love that. I didn't get a chance to get to the public hearing on the Planning Commission meeting. But I did watch online and heard all the well-stated questions and concerns of the commission. And all the answers that were given by the chief were all satisfactory for the city's needs and potential impacts. All that's good. But I wanted to come in today and comment directly because of the impact the rezoning may make for the church specifically. If you look at the map kind of brings this rezoning property all the way down in catty corners with the property that the church owns. And so I had a lot of concerns about that. I've only been the pastor of BC Home Church since October. So, man, this is fresh for us. We're coming up on 1 year. And so I would look out of those doors of the church and see that big property and all of the open area and really have a lot of dreams and hopes of potential expansion. because God's really doing some really cool things at the church, and we're seeing people come. We had to go to a second service because of the need for more room, and in fact, we had plans. The founding pastor had plans, architectural plans for the whole property, and so they were only able to financially take care of the parking lot. So we have a parking lot and we have a temporary facility on the parking lot with the hopes that one day we would build on that particular property. We have our plans in right now, thankfully, to Toneman Developmental Corporation here in town. And so out for bid, trying to find out some round numbers for us to know what we need to raise in order to get this ball rolling for us. But if we build this facility, it's going to basically corner out that whole area. And I got real concerned about the rezoning because I didn't know what it meant. So I talked to the community development director, Michael Mays. I emailed him, asked him, what does this mean for us? Does this mean that this property is off limits now? He assured me in a meeting that I had with him and Chief Gray about just if there was a need to purchase more property, that it could be rezoned at the time of the agreement of the sale purchase of that. So that meeting really did ease a lot of my concerns. And so it did also satisfy the scare that it would be an untouchable piece of property because it would really landlock us in to only developing in two different directions and really not squaring off. So I'm not really speaking in regards to for or against this particular item on the agenda. I just wanted to state our intention. And the intention of our church is twofold. I'm hoping that the council would be flexible with us if the time did come where we needed to purchase some extra property and the rezoning of some areas. Chief Gray said that they were not going to use all of that property. It's just being rezoned so that in case, they had needs to put construction materials and so on. So I'm asking for flexibility. I'm stating the intention of the need for some property. My guess is that we're going to continue to grow. We're going to need more land. We're going to need more space. And so I'm asking for flexibility from the council. If that time were to arise, that maybe we can rezone and not have to jump through a whole lot of additional hoops. That would be great. And then secondly, I'm hoping that with the training facility put up, that we could address the drainage. The drainage of that large piece of dirt typically ends up right in our parking lot. In a good rain, we get half the dirt from the drainage area on our parking lot, and it takes us quite a bit of money and time and manpower to clean that area off of our parking lot. So if they're going to build it, man, I would really like to see that trench get off of our property and onto like the area towards either to the east of where we are. So anyway, thank you so much, you guys, and thanks for listening.
Thank you. Anyone else want to approach the podium?
Kurt Goodfellow here. I got here a little bit late, but I understand that there might be some who, and it's not you guys, but there might be some listening who might want to spread misinformation about hangar owners being charged less than market rates. And I just want to remind everybody that from what we understand is the approved rate now, it's still 40% higher than the market rate. And like I say, you guys know this, but I just want to make sure anybody who might be tempted to spread this disinformation that, here again, we're 40% above market rate with these rates that have been proposed. And just wanted to make sure that everybody was aware of that. And once again, thank you for your work.
Thank you. Anyone else? Please, if you could approach the podium, identify yourself, and
My name is Linda Hyman, and I thank you all for serving our community, Mayor Hardy.
council people. I'm just concerned about what that proposed rate is. that
If
think
you
is the
could
fair-
speak into the microphone.
I would like to know what the proposed market rate is. That's 40% above market rate. What is that figure?
So this being public comment, we're not engaging in question answer as much as we would like you to say what you want to say.
Okay, well, I just think, I've been reading a lot about what's going on with the hangars, and I don't understand why it's so complicated. You know, if we just follow the market rate, as I was reading up on it, there was an appraised rate. One, I think, off the top of my head was 571, but that was gross, but it was 456 if it was net, triple net. But then arbitrarily, and I don't know how, it turned into 251 or thereabouts, and that is now the fair market rate, is, as to my understanding, and I don't know how that figure came about, it just did. And I'm just curious as to what 40% above the market rate is, because I'm trying to get a handle on it. Like, what is the market rate? And if we just all follow the market rate, then it's a done deal, right? I don't get the complication. But thank you all.
Thank you. Appreciate your comments. Anyone else like to make public comment at this time? No one on the phone, no other written comments? We will close public comment and go to possible action, approval of the regular agenda. Madam City Clerk,
No changes for the regular agenda.
thank you. Can I have a motion to approve the regular agenda?
To approve regular agenda.
I'll second that.
Motion and seconded to approve the regular agenda. Any discussion? Seeing none. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Unanimous. Thank you. And then for possible action, approval of the consent agenda, Madam City Clerk.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. I'm requesting items 2 and 3 be moved from the consent agenda to the regular agenda after item number 9.
Is there a motion to that effect?
I move to approve the consent agenda with the removal of 2 and 3 down to the regular agenda
After number 9.
after number 9.
Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed say nay. Unanimous. Thank you very much. So we'll move to the consent agenda, which does not include number 2 and 3. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
We're ready to move on to item number 9.
Okay. And we will move to number 9. Warren, no relation Hardy.
I claim you all the time, Your Honor. Thank you, Your Honor, members of the council. Warren Hardy, pleased to be here today to offer a brief. The mayor made sure 12 and a half minutes. I knew that direction came from the mayor when it was 12 and a half. I'll do my best, Mayor. You know, the legislature continues to evolve. I've been involved with the legislature in one capacity or another since 1991, every session. And two major things occurred in that 30 some odd years. The first was we went to 120-day limited sessions. And the second one is we went to term limits. And those two things have had a dramatic impact on the legislature. And the legislature continues to evolve with those two limitations. And so for the last several sessions, we've seen a lot of I would call them growing pains. But there's been some partisanship there. This session certainly wasn't the most partisan I've ever seen. There were moments where it was very partisan, but there were also moments when the legislature came together to resolve matters related to the state. Most of you know we went into not one but two special sessions this session. The first one was really brought about by some of the contention and fight that was going on over the budget and some of the governor's agenda that forced us into a special session to complete the budget. That was a very short special session. That was just a matter of hours. The second special session went on for quite a bit longer, and that was ironing out the details of the incentive package to bring the Oakland A's to Las Vegas. A lot of comments about whether that could have or should have gotten done during the regular session. But I think, it was fairly remarkable from where they started at the beginning of the session to where they concluded at the end of the special session, particularly on the A's Stadium. So this legislative session was my first representing the city of Boulder City. I've represented the city as a member of the legislature, as a member of the Senate. I've always very much enjoyed Boulder City and was honored this session to represent Boulder City. I've provided to you just a brief narrative and breakdown of the legislation that was primarily what we focused on this session. In reality, we tracked on a daily basis somewhere around 1,000 pieces of legislation for impact on the city. And I really want to thank your staff, Taylor and Brittany, for working so closely with us to determine the impact, and to you, Mayor, for coming to Carson City on a minute's notice when we needed you. Because I represented Boulder City this time, it was easy for me to bring Boulder City into the local government lobby. There's sort of a coalition of local government lobbying efforts that's built up over the past several sessions, and it's being used by great effect. It was helpful to us on the piece of legislation we had to get passed. It was helpful for us to compare notes, join arms with other local governments, and so that was a benefit, I believe, to the city, that we were able to bring Boulder City into the, I'm going to call it the local government lobby as a regular daily member. No surprise if you follow the legislature that it was the legislature now pursues a fairly progressive agenda. You'll notice as I talk that there's not a lot of focus for a city like Boulder City really on policy matters. There is, but generally council members don't take strong positions on policy issues. What we do take a position on is something that's becoming an increasing problem, and I think is a result of those two dynamics I mentioned, and that is that the state government is now really starting to encroach on issues and matters that have historically been local government issues. When I started in the legislature in the early 90s, Senator Ann O'Connell, some of you might remember her, really had a position of, the issues of government are best resolved at the level of government closest to the people. I succeeded her as chairman of government affairs. I very much had that same philosophy that these issues ought to be resolved at the local level. Never did we make the case that the local government doesn't have the right, or the state government doesn't have the right to involve themselves in those issues, but just historically it hasn't happened. We've seen that really dramatically be chipped away at the last few sessions. This session in particular, issues that would be generally left to the local government are now being taken on by the legislature. They have every right to do it, but again, it's just one of those things that we've never really seen happen. The other thing that happened this session I've never seen such an emphasis on organized labor issues, particularly on expanding the payment of prevailing wage. Again, not opining on the issue, but some of the pieces of legislation that brought forward would have significantly increased the cost of construction for all local governments. And so I'll talk about a few of those. And again, as I go through these, don't often opine on the policy unless it directly impacts the city, but what we tend to get involved with aggressively is the precedent of the state coming in and doing the job that local governments traditionally have been left to do. So I'm just going to go through these quickly because I'm rapidly running out of my 12 minutes. Let me just jump to Assembly Bill 220, which was a bill dealing with septic systems that allowed the Southern Nevada water districts and their customers, it allows the Southern Nevada Water Authority to mandate connection to sewer. I tried to get us exempt from that. However, as customers of the Southern Nevada Water Authority, wasn't really possible to do. But we did leave some local government control there. Another bill required the Board of County Commissioners in each city to designate one or more employees of the city to be responsible for biennially revising a language access plan. We were able to get Boulder City exempt from that. Brittany brought that to my attention in a very panicked moment, and we were able, again, not an issue with the policy, it's an issue with whether we have the personnel to designate one person to do that. But we were able to secure an exemption for the city of Boulder City for that. Our legislation, Senate Bill 23, which is the legislation regarding the redevelopment area, that turned out to be a far more difficult bill to get passed than I thought it would. And I should have known better, because anytime you open up the redevelopment statutes, you've got a whole bunch of takers. I think I beat back at least 5 efforts to try to amend the bill. But Brittany and I made a deal early with the chairman of the committee that we're just going to crack this open for our need, and we're going to leave it alone on everything else. And he, Chairman Flores, backed us on that significantly, because he took a lot of pressure too to try to evolve that into other things. But we were able to successfully get that passed. Let's see. Senate Bill 92 was probably one of the most contentious of the legislature. You might recall that as the sidewalk vendor Bill of Rights bill that as initially drafted basically opened up the right to street vend pretty much unfettered, made it so the local governments couldn't really mandate or control or penalize. That was a piece of legislation that took more time probably than any we dealt with at the local government level. At the end, what we ended up with is a piece of legislation whereby we cannot charge individuals who are street vending criminally, but we can charge them if they're not following the ordinances. But we left completely intact the city's ability to adopt the ordinances they believe are appropriate for their city. So that was a very contentious bill. Senate Bill 226, in the 30 years that I've been involved, was the most aggressive attempt to expand prevailing wage. Basically, as originally drafted, it would have required the payment of prevailing wage on any issue where a government subsidy was provided, right down to the point, and I asked legislative legal this question: if the city were to waive a credit card fee, an application fee, or anything for a private developer who was building a home development in the city, they would have had to pay prevailing wage on the payment on building that. That was made additionally difficult by the fact that it was the majority leader. It was co-sponsored by the majority leader and the speaker. That took the majority of the session to negotiate this as well. At the end of the day, we negotiated it to a bill that clarifies that prevailing wage must be paid on lease purchase projects, which I actually thought that we had clarified in 2006 when I chaired an interim committee to do it. But it removed all those provisions from prevailing wage. Again, not a comment on prevailing wage. I don't think anybody disagrees that a fair and living wage should be paid, but to expand it as broadly as that was being proposed was problematic for our budget. We did pass Senate Bill 243, which is the most aggressive legislation in the country, as far as I know, with regard to catalytic converter theft. I'm not sure how much catalytic converter theft occurs here in Boulder City, but it's a growing problem across the United States. We have the most aggressive catalytic theft statute in the state, making the possession of more than 2 catalytic converters a felony. So that should dramatically reduce catalytic converter theft. Bills that were vetoed by the governor, there were a number of prevailing wage bills that expanded the payment of prevailing wage to the fabrication of projects. Is something that's been dealt with a number of times through the legislature that the governor vetoed. There was a very interesting bill, a difficult bill, Senate Bill 272, which would require local government to post on their website the total number of contracts awarded to minority-owned, women-owned, LGBTQ-owned businesses. I made the obvious observation that much of that is information we're not permitted by law to ask about. It can be voluntarily given to us, but we're not allowed to request it. So again, one of these policies where the heart's in the right place, but is not really functional for the local governments to be able to be in compliance with, and the governor vetoed that bill as well. Let's see. Several bills we were able to, that I think were bad for local governments, were able to actually stop in the legislative process and didn't have to rely on the governor's veto. One was a bill to, in my opinion, that took significant authority and ability away from local governments to deal with cannabis events. The governor vetoed that bill. We did secure an amendment that made sure that we still had complete authority to deny the events or set up the parameters, but it was a step in a direction that was problematic from your ability as a council and staff to be able to control the types of events that are in your community. Again, the philosophy is what we had a problem with. We had legislation that prohibited local governments from being able to adopt ordinances that prohibited home-based businesses. Again, home-based businesses are a good thing. People like them. We like them, but they need to be controlled, and the city council needs to have the ability to control them based on the desires of the community. We were able to defeat that bill. Many of you heard about Senate Bill 142, which was initially called the Homeless Bill of Rights, which really was problematic. We really worked hard to try to get some resolution to this, but it basically, as originally drafted, would have tied the hands of your law enforcement from enforcing any kind of activity by the homeless. Again, worked very hard to try to get a resolution of that. It proved too difficult, and that bill did not pass. One bill that didn't really directly impact the city of Boulder City that we worked really hard on was Senate Bill 184, and it was a bill that would have changed the charter of the city of North Las Vegas in some significant ways. I spoke about the coalition, the local government coalition of lobbying efforts. We worked really hard on this as a coalition because of the precedent that it sets. Again, legislature, I don't want to get emails from my legislative friends who might be listening. Legislature has the absolute right to make a charter change. But historically, those issues have been left to the local governments. When I was chair of government affairs, I used to tell local governments that if you have a charter commission and you have a majority vote of your council, I will do everything I can to get the legislature to give whatever it is you want. But this set a precedent, this was Senator Pat Spearman, this set a precedent of the state government deciding what was best for local government. So we frankly adamantly opposed that bill. Spoke with the governor's office about it. He made a kind of unprecedented. He made a comment pretty early in session that he was going to veto it. I'm not sure I've ever seen that happen, but we certainly appreciated his support on that. The other bill that was sort of interesting was Senate Bill 427. Again, this was one of those labor bills, but it would have required certain mitigation requirements related to heat illness and exposure to poor air quality. One of the things that it would have required was that employees couldn't work outside in temperatures above 95 degrees. I asked the committee, how is it possible to fight a fire or conduct law enforcement activities if you can't be out in temperatures above 90 degrees in southern Nevada? Obviously, that wasn't the legislative intent. They changed that. They gave us an amendment for that immediately. But there were additional things that were problematic with that legislation with regard to us being able to do our jobs as local governments, and we were able to defeat that bill. The mayor asked me specifically to talk just briefly about things to watch for based on what the legislature did, what it didn't do, what the governor vetoed. And the one thing I will tell you is that this issue of encroachment upon local government authority is something we're going to have to watch very, very carefully. I'm advising my local government clients to get very engaged, very involved in the interim committees so that we can nip that kind of activity in the bud. I have talked to legislative leadership about it. I've talked to the chairman of the Government Affairs Committee about it. And you know, they put this legislation forward because they believe it's a good idea, and they're right, and they have the right to do it. But they don't often consider the impact on local government. As we talked about prior to session in my presentation, Boulder City is very different than most cities in Nevada. We're a small town in a large county. There's two cities that applies to, Mesquite and Boulder City. We have to take a very different approach when it comes to legislation. And really, in my experience, it just requires that we spend time educating legislators why one size doesn't fit all when it comes to legislation. So I would say it was a successful session. Again, I want to thank your staff. I want to thank you, Mayor, for the time that you spent being up there, being engaged in the process, and I'd be happy to take any questions. How many minutes was that?
Less than 12 times 2. Okay. Thank you, Warren. We appreciate your representation. Any questions or observations from council?
Just to thank you for being up there and looking out for us in Boulder City and recognizing that, yes, we are a small city in a big county, and that it does impact us differently when mandates are handed down that need to be funded, and it can change the composition of how we run here. So thank you very much for being diligent and putting forth your best effort to help us. So thank you.
Thank you so much for the opportunity to represent the city.
Thank you. And what I got from your report is Boulder City is still a special city.
Very much so. And very respected in Carson City, as are you, Your Honor, and as are your staff. Brittany's got a long history and experience up there, and the city and your staff are very well thought of by legislators, and we were able to have a great deal of success because of that. So,
Thank you. Appreciate your report. Pardon? We'll move to number 2 on our agenda. And that was from the consent agenda, for those of you keeping track. And I have something to read that will hopefully clarify something before we have the other discussion. Nevada ethics law is the guiding compass for public officials to determine when there is a conflict of interest. You may want to sit down. And when to disclose and abstain from participation on an item. It encourages disclosure even if there is an appearance of impropriety. It broadly encompasses all private relationships that could be a conflict of interest or even appear as such, including family relations, business relationships, and of course pecuniary interests. The ethics law states the following with regard to abstention. Because abstention, where we don't vote, by a public official disrupts the normal course of representative government and deprives the public and public officers' constituents of a voice in government affairs. The disclosure and abstention restrictions are intended to require abstention only in clear cases where the independence of judgment of a reasonable person in the public officer's situation would be materially affected. That's NRS 281A.420. Importantly, the ethics law, do I get longer? Okay. The ethics law expressly excludes from disclosure and abstention requirements properly reported campaign contributions. This is because contributions are already reported to the public via the contributions and expenditures reports. And because campaign contributions are limited to campaign expenditures, not for personal use. Additionally, there is another layer of protection for the public dollar, the competitive bid process. The city follows the bid process in accordance with NRS Chapter 332 and 338, which requires an open and competitive bidding process for any project in the amount of $100,000 or more. The bid pertaining to the reconstruct Taxiway Bravo and Electrical Improvements Project was posted in Nevada Government e-Marketplace, NGEM, which is used to publish formal bids. The NGEM system is a secure system authorizing no one, including the system administrator, to view submitted bids until it is formally unsealed by the purchasing manager after the posted closing date and time. The system tabulates all bid submissions and places them in ranking order from lowest cost to highest cost. The bid in question was sent to 4,604 vendors throughout Nevada and surrounding states and advertised for 6 weeks. Per NRS, it was also published in the Las Vegas Review-Journal. Only one vendor, Las Vegas Paving Corporation, submitted a bid. The public should be rest assured that the City Council members are upholding the public trust and are representing our constituency. With that, I would open the item number 2 for discussion. Anybody? Go ahead, Marissa.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Marissa Adu, the Airport Manager. Tonight we have two resolutions. Resolution 7684 as a resolution accepting a Federal Aviation Administration Airport Improvement Grant in the amount of $6,200,092 for Reconstruct Taxiway Bravo and electrical improvements, and amending both the funding and expenditures for the fiscal year capital budget, as well as awarding the project with a resolution 7685, approving agreement 23-2054, awarding a bid to Las Vegas Paving Corporation in the amount of $5,899,572 for work pertaining to the Reconstruct Taxiway Bravo and electrical improvements project, and amending both the funding and expenditures for fiscal year capital budget. Is there any questions?
Any questions? Go ahead.
So is the 5,899,572, is that the total cost of the entire project?
That's the total cost for just the construction of the project, and then there's additional cost for the design and engineering, and then the project management of the project.
Okay, thank you.
If no other questions, comments?
Mr. Mayor,
Go ahead,
if I can make a comment, please.
please.
It came up during briefing yesterday, but I'll make it at large for the public. We talked about Taxiway Bravo serving 2 runways, runway 15 and runway 33, and that at either end, traditionally when you have a runway approach area, you have a run-up area for the aircraft to do what's called a run-up. Make sure everything's functioning properly with the motor and the mags and engine oil pressure and temperature and so forth before you do your takeoff. So anyway, it's noted that on Taxiway Bravo in those 2 areas, there's no run-up area. And we talked about the potential for alternative location and or notification to pilots in our airport facility directory, and even potentially on the recording for ATIS. So anyway, I just wanted to make that as part of the record for for the council meeting and appreciate the conversation yesterday. There's really no impediment to something that will help us accomplish that. Is that right?
No.
Okay, thank you. That's all I had, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. So bottom line, this will make things safer?
That would, yeah, that's what we're aiming for there, yeah.
We're into safety. Thank you. Any other comments? Okay. So I would accept a motion on Resolution 7684.
I make a motion to approve 7684.
Is there a second?
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed say nay. A majority unanimous. Thank you. And then we'll move to Resolution 7685 for a motion.
I make a motion to approve 7685.
I'll second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Nay. Unanimous again. Thank you very much. We'll move to number 3 and have time for disclosures.
Thank you. I'd like to disclose that I have a commitment in a private capacity to the Boulder City Museum Historic Association as I serve on the association's governing board as the city's representative. Even though I serve in my public capacity, the Ethics Commission has opined that when a public officer serves on a nonprofit governance structure, this creates a substantial and continuing business relationship. However, I've been advised by the city attorney that I may still participate and vote on this matter.
Thank you.
I would like to disclose that I have a commitment in a private capacity to the Boulder City Museum Historic Association. I lease the restaurant space located in the Boulder Dam Hotel, and the association is my landlord. I have been advised by the city attorney that I may still participate and vote on this matter as there is no change in the status quo.
Any other discussion or questions? I would accept a motion.
I move to pass Resolution 7686.
Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed say nay. It's unanimous again. Thank you very much. We will move to item number 10, matters pertaining zoning ordinance amendment. And this will open up public hearing at this time before considering bill number 1964. Go ahead, Mr. Mays.
Good evening, Mayor Hardy and members of the City Council. Boulder City calculates the parking regulations for restaurants differently than the other jurisdictions in the valley. The other jurisdictions in the valley, they look at restaurants and they look at the square footage of the restaurant to determine the parking requirements for that restaurant. Boulder City counts the number of chairs within the restaurant. This is an old method in determining parking calculations. It takes longer to do that process. And so to help streamline the review process and to bring us in line with the other jurisdictions, staff proposed the text amendment, which is the subject of Bill 1964. It would remove the requirement for counting the number of chairs and instead apply a requirement for one parking space for every 150 square feet of area of the restaurant. This went before the Planning Commission on July 19th, and they recommended unanimously in support of this text amendment. And I can answer any questions.
Any questions? Thank you. We'll open up the public hearing. If anyone wants to say anything, please come forward. Is there anything on the phone or written?
No written comments were submitted, and nobody's on the phone at this time.
Okay. If you're on the phone, 702-589-9629. No one on the phone?
No callers.
We will close public hearing and move to consideration of bill number 1964, and I would accept a motion.
Move to approve Bill 1964.
I'll second.
Moved and seconded to approve bill number 1964. Is there any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed say nay. Unanimous. Thank you. Move to item 11. Again, a public hearing, Mr. Mays.
There's approximately 1,500 acres west of the El Dorado Valley and east of the Sloan Canyon National Conservation Area that is city-owned land. The area referred to as Black Hills North was added to the land management process in 2020 for renewable energy uses. As you can see on the screen, there's consideration for you this evening on two matters related to the land use for this property. The first is Resolution 7694, which would amend the city's master plan land use designation from open lands to manufacturing energy. And as you can note on the screen, as we've done in the past, the top image shows the current land use designation, and the bottom image shows the proposed change. In addition to that, we have Bill 1965, which would rezone the property from GO government space to ER manufacturing energy. And likewise, we have on the screen the exhibit showing this zoning change. On July 19th, the Planning Commission held a public hearing regarding these matters and recommended 5-1 in support of the master plan amendment and the zoning changes. And with that, I can answer any questions.
Thank you. Any questions or comments? I would accept, or we need to have a public hearing now, so I'll open it up for public hearing. All those who would like to say anything, please come to the podium or call in at 702-589-9629. And we have no written comments. Thank you. No one on the phone. Close the public hearing and go to Resolution 7694, and I would accept a motion.
I'll move, oh, go ahead, Koki.
Go ahead.
Okay, I'll move to pass Resolution 7694.
I'll second that.
Moved and seconded to accept Resolution 7694. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed say nay. It's unanimous. Thank you. And then we'll move to consideration of bill number 1965. And any discussion before somebody makes a motion? Accept a motion
I move to approve 1965.
and a second.
I'll second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion? See none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed say no. It has been passed unanimously. Thank you. We will move to item number 12. Mr. Mays.
City owns 4.4 acres southwest of the current fire station located at 1101 Elm Street. The fire department is planning a fire training facility at this location. For your consideration this evening is Resolution 7695, which would amend the city's master plan land use designation for this property from mixed-use commercial to quasi-public uses. In addition, we have for your consideration Bill number 1966, which would rezone the property from C2 general commercial to GM government municipal. On July 19th, the Planning Commission held a public hearing regarding these matters and recommended 6-0 in support of these proposed land use changes. And with that, I can answer any questions.
Any questions? Seeing none, we'll open the public hearing, and anyone who wishes to come forward can come forward and have their day. Call in at 702-589-9629, and there's no written comments. Okay. No one on the phone. I will close the public hearing and accept a motion on resolution number 7695.
I'll make a motion to pass resolution 7695.
Is there a second?
Second.
Moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? See none. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed say nay. It is unanimous. Thank you. And then I would accept a motion on bill number 1966.
I move to pass bill number 1966.
Second.
I'll second that.
Moved and double seconded.
Oh, you're
Any discussion? I think you want to say something.
Oh, no, I'm up here for the next item.
Okay, all right.
Mr. Mayor?
Go ahead.
During the discussion, if I might comment, I think Kevin left already, but I think it's worth noting that his thoughts and concerns were duly heard, and I think it's important to state also that staff and council are aware of that goal of that community church to potentially expand and find a way to use some of the land that might currently be available if they so enter into those negotiations. And we appreciate the comments from that pastor and look forward to their growth and potentially working with them in the future. So I just want to make those comments, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you.
Also, just a question. I know he talked about drainage. I'm sure that's a part that's going to be considered during that so that it doesn't drain into their parking lot, right?
Of course, any project that we do will address any kind of drainage with the site plan and all of that, and their actual location is off of Adams, so it is a little farther from where this will be.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? I would accept a motion. We did. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed say nay. Unanimous. Thank you. We'll move to number 13 on our agenda for consideration, bill number 1967. Go ahead, Madam City Attorney.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Mayor and council members. I'm here to present to you bill number 1967. This bill would bring the Boulder City Code into compliance with state law and allow a civil process of enforcement against public nuisances. Public nuisances are generally prohibited by municipalities. They're currently prohibited by our current code. They include conditions on real property that exist, such as blight, garbage, neglected landscaping, abandoned properties, hazardous buildings, etc. State law allows local jurisdictions to take action to eliminate these conditions and seek compensation from the property owner for those costs under certain circumstances. This is known as abatement. NRS 268.4122 through 4126 allow cities to enact abatement ordinances to allow for the abatement of these public nuisances as well as dangerous or noxious buildings. The state law generally requires such an ordinance to provide for notice, opportunity for hearing, as well as impose civil penalties. Boulder City Code Title 8, Chapter 1 does currently prohibit public nuisances and allow for abatement, but its procedures are not up to date with state law. Attachment 1 has Boulder City's current ordinance. There is essentially a three-step process of enforcement for a public nuisance. At first, a person will receive a notice of violation. This is not a fine. This is simply a notice that explains what the violation is and a time for compliance. If the person does not comply with the notice of violation and bring their property into compliance by the deadline, then the code enforcement officer can write a civil citation to impose an administrative fine, which will be set by resolution of the city council, and the fine will be required to be paid the property owner will be required to bring their property again into compliance. There is an appeal process within this ordinance as well. It follows the state law. The person will have 30 days to appeal the notice of violation or the citation, and or if it's an abatement order, then the abatement order to the Community Development Department is the first level of appeal. The Community Development Department or his or her designee, including a hearing officer, will schedule a hearing to hear the appeal, and the person will have an opportunity to come before that individual and explain, why the notice of violation is incorrect or why the fine shouldn't be assessed. Then if the appellant is unhappy with the decision upon that appeal level, there is a final appeal as the bill is currently written to City Council. Then the abatement process, again, also follows state law requiring notice and a hearing before the city could take steps to abate a condition. And I just want to reiterate that abatement is only used in extreme circumstances for chronic nuisances, abandoned nuisances, or dangerous or hazardous buildings. This is not a process that would be used for just your regular violation of the ordinance. I also have before you on the dais 2 amendments for your review. I want to go through what each of these accomplishes. The first is just a cleanup amendment. These are minor typos and changes that were noticed after the bill was introduced, and I'll just quickly go through what those changes are. To the definition section in section 8.812 on page 3, the definition of person, the former definition read an individual, firm, association, organization, partnership, business trust, corporation, or company. Really, a trust in and of itself is typically a person under most definitions of law, so this just struck the word business. In the definition of recreational vehicles, on page 4, there's a little N. The definition of it's not the definition of recreational vehicles. It's the definition of public nuisance, which includes the use of an RV as living quarters on premises other than a licensed RV park. So the former definition said that the RV shall be deemed used as living quarters if it's connected to sanitary, sewer, electrical, or municipal water services. This was changed to may because sometimes RVs are connected for a temporary purpose to get the RV ready for use and things like that. So that's why the shall was changed to may so that the code enforcement officer can look at the totality of the circumstances and really determine whether the RV is being used as living quarters and not just temporarily connected to, say, electrical or water. Then in section it's on page 11 in section, it's a long section, 816, for the abatement special assessment. This is for recovery of abatement costs. Just added that the statement that we file with the Clark County Recorder has to set forth the legal description and parcel number. That's required by law, so we just added that to make that clear. Those are the only cleanup changes that were made, and then you have before you a second amendment. The Nevada state law does require the final appeal to either go to city council or to the municipal court. So it can be either, and this amendment would have the final appeal level go to the municipal court. So, so council has that at its option. So with that, I'm open for any questions, or if you'd like to discuss amongst yourselves, please let me know.
Any questions?
I have one.
Go ahead.
So I thought when we talked yesterday in our briefing that we had the option of city council or the municipal court, but we've decided to go with municipal court.
That's up for the council to decide today. So if
Oh,
the
okay.
council wants to have the final appeal go to the municipal court, you would just include in your motion to approve Bill 1967 to include Amendment 2
Okay.
on the dais here.
Amendment C.
Amendment 2. So you have Amendment 1, which is the cleanup, and then Amendment 2
Okay.
is the municipal court.
Amendment 2.
Mhm.
Go ahead.
Thank you. For clarification purposes, I want to, again, put some things on the record. On page 1 of the proposed bill under number B, Bravo, purpose.
Yes.
Okay, we have the definition there, promote the life, health, safety, aesthetic, economic, general welfare of the citizens. And then we give some examples, nuisances, blight, deterioration, whether it's unoccupied or occupied. However, as stated further down, this could not only apply to visual things that we see, collection of trash, standing water, it's other things we normally consider blight to the eye. But it also involves violations of use, correct?
It includes violations of Title 11, yes.
Okay, so under definitions 8-1-2, Section B, Bravo, number G, violations of city codes, ordinances, or other adopted policies are also included as public nuisances in this proposed ordinance, right? As stated in that number, or in that line. So again, I just want to make it clear that we're talking that more than just, trash or, a pool full of algae or whatever, or people not picking up after their pets in their backyard, but it's expanded. And if you go further down on page 3, number 18, down to the bottom of that page, I, criminal activity. I would like to, note that we might consider some additional language that says and or unlawful. In my mind, when I think of criminal activity, I think of a police action that's happening at that moment that needs intervention. But since we're talking about violations of city codes or Title 11, that potentially could be unlawful activity. It seems like that's the line where we might be able to add criminal/unlawful activity. Some things for us to consider. And then further down in L, it is expressed any violation of zoning ordinance of Boulder City Title 11, which includes conditional uses, permitted or not permitted activities, or those conditional uses that are given with specific guidelines and conditions. So this could expand into those things as well. And I just want to make sure that as we discuss this, that we're recognizing that it's much more than what we typically consider a blighted, vacant property or one that's not being maintained, weeds and broken down cars and all that kind of thing. So am I on the right track with that? Would you make any corrections to those statements?
I might just say the criminal activity typically is used when there's like drug manufacturing within a home. That's often the police are able to remedy that situation. That's typically what it is used for.
Is there any reason why we would not want to consider adding the word unlawful?
Well, the ordinance is really meant to capture, violations of public nuisances occurring on private property, delineated here, including violations of our zoning code. That's delineated, violations of the building code, fire code. It's not necessarily to capture any violation of the code completely. It depends on. So the criminal activity portion and I is really, I think, meant for when if a property is used in the commission of criminal activity, like drug manufacturing, things like that.
I may be able to clarify a little bit or make it more opaque. So as I understand it, we in Boulder City have had a criminal offense. And this would, the NRS, the legislature in their wisdom, has said that we need to make these a civil offense as opposed to a criminal offense. But it did not remove criminal offenses from our purview of being able to arrest somebody for something that's illegal. Is some of that right?
Yes, just traffic offenses were made civil. So if there is a criminal offense in our ordinance, then we can treat it as such.
And so the ordinance that we're doing is to take out of the criminal statute and put it into the civil statute, thus making it, quote, unquote, easier to resolve civil things instead of going through the courts for all of the little things that we now, according to state law, would be civil.
Yes, the state law does require and has required for some time a civil enforcement process for public nuisances. So yes, this brings our code up to date with that and provides that civil enforcement process, which just does have a lower burden of proof and does allow for enforcement.
So we can be more aggressive with our civil ordinance than we can if we go through the court system.
No, I would say that the public nuisances, the goal of the public nuisance statute ordinance can be met more easily here because with the civil mechanism for enforcement, we are now compliant with state law. And the goal here has been to bring us up to date with state law, and so that we, if we have an issue, we can let the homeowner know and take appropriate action. We normally get voluntary compliance 95% of the time whenever we have a violation, and so we don't anticipate that to change. We do think that voluntary compliance, this is just for when we don't get voluntary compliance, we can take the appropriate steps and take that appropriate action so that our code is being complied with.
So if I may pursue that, then if the homeowner is responsible for the party that's too loud, it's not the visiting people who get the problem, and the homeowner is responsible for that civil ordinance violation.
That's right.
And likewise, if the homeowner is in charge of his home, but people who are visiting walk their dog next door and the dog does what dogs do, it's the homeowner's responsibility and the homeowner receives the violation.
That's right.
Okay. Go ahead. I think I may have confused in some ways what you were trying to say, Councilman Walden.
Not at all. No, thank you. So my next question, before we kind of begin our discussion, or at least that I have, under 8-1-7, the appeal process. So in 95% or thereabouts, we get voluntary compliance, right? When we have some type of a discussion with the homeowner from our code enforcement folks, right?
Yeah, and that's a ballpark. That's not any,
Yeah.
you know,
So we're not-
scientifically based number, but.
Yeah, I guess
yeah.
what your point is, and you can clarify, is that most of the time, really, we don't go into the formalities of all of this.
No, we normally don't need to.
Okay. So if you could explain then the ideas that you have about this appeal procedure and the layers of the appeal procedure and how you envision that actually occurring.
Yes, so, and this is modeled off of, in drafting the ordinance, we looked at the city of Las Vegas, city of Henderson, city of North Las Vegas, Carson City, and Mesquite. And many of those jurisdictions use hearing officers in order to hear appeals. And hearing officers are a third party that's appointed via usually resolution of the city council. And the hearing officer can be assigned to a case. They can't have any conflict or interest in that case or have any relationship with the parties. The hearing officer also can't have a relationship with the city, and they must be a resident of Nevada under this draft bill. The hearing officer allows a third-party person to hear the appeal so that the homeowner can feel that a third party had input here in making this decision. The way the bill is drafted, the hearing officers are not mandatory. They're simply an option. The community development director ultimately is the appeal authority, and they can designate whomever they feel is appropriate, including a hearing officer if the city council chooses to appoint a list. So it's simply enabling language, and it's what many cities use for various levels of appeal, for business license, for code enforcement. This process is very similar to Carson City's. Carson City's process is a hearing officer, and then they have the final appeal to the municipal court. So it's just simply in line with what a lot of jurisdictions do, but ultimately there can be other ways to address it. It can just be an administrative appeal to the community development department. It can go straight to city council or the municipal court. You don't have to have a second layer. So it's really up to this body what they feel is appropriate.
Thank you. That's all I have, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. I personally am not anxious for appeals to come to the city council. I think if we have an appeal from a hearing officer that is not happy with that, it should go then to the court. And at the same time, I don't think we need to have every little thing go to the court system. So I appreciate what you're talking about as the hearing officer being able to do something. I think that's probably wise. So what other discussions or questions do we have?
I'd like to say I agree with you, Mayor. I'd like to be the good guy, not the bad guy. So I'll send it to I'd like to see it go to the court also. I think it's a fairer process that way.
Go ahead.
Can we exclude the hearing officer if it goes to the court? Can it be a two-step process as opposed to a three-step process?
Yeah, the city can make it. The council could make it a two-step process. The bill might have to have some language tweaks for that. So I may have to bring it back if we want to make it a two-step process. But yes.
I'm just contemplating, right? So if we have a hearing officer, then we have to pay a hearing officer. And if it's able to be handled in a two-step process, that's one less payment that we have to make as far as those monies go out for that. And we do have the judge here, and we do have that option that you just talked about, right? So if it went to community development and then went to the judge with that two-step process, do you feel like that would be due diligence in that case?
Oh, yes. I was misunderstanding what you were saying. You could delete the references to the hearing officer and just have the first level appeal go to the community development department, and the second level go to the municipal court judge. You would just say delete the references to the hearing officer.
That's not needing to outlay any more expense, right?
Well, that's right, but I would just reiterate that under the way this bill is drafted, the hearing officers are optional. So we'd only utilize hearing officers if the city council later in a separate action approved a list of hearing officers and approved a compensation schedule, et cetera. So it's simply enabling. It doesn't require the use of hearing officers. It just allows a tool in our toolbox if we wish to do it at some point.
Okay, thank you.
It was my understanding yesterday that that was going to be paid for by the person going to the hearing, or would it be the city paying for that hearing officer?
Typically, the cities pay for the hearing officers. The fines and fees, of course, help fund code enforcement, which then would be used to pay the hearing officers. Other jurisdictions pay, from my research, anywhere from $75 to $100 an hour, and it's usually limited to about 10 hours per case, so that there can only be a maximum amount per case for the hearing officer to collect. But that is typically paid by the municipality.
So if we go to the court, they're already equipped to do that, and then would those funds go to the court instead of to us that was collected?
So the way the bill's written, the bill sets up a revolving fund where the fines have to be used for code enforcement matters. So if it's a city expense and it's related to code enforcement, then the funds could be used to address that. So, and the court would also charge administrative fees. They would charge a filing fee for an appeal as well.
And so who would pay that?
The filing fee would be paid by the appellant. It's typically it would be set by resolution later, because any fees and fines we have to do a business impact statement for. But it's usually about $25. It's nominal.
So we wouldn't have to pay for the judge to listen to the case, is what you're saying?
Well, the municipal court is funded. I know that they're funded a lot by the fines and fees they collect on their own, but they are a general fund supported department as well. So there wouldn't be any extra cost.
But you just stated my concern that you said that they, from the fines and fees that they collect, so they would be collecting those fines and fees.
No, the only fee the court would collect is a filing fee, which would be around maybe $25. Again, it would have to be set by council later. And so the other fines would be payable to the city, and those fines would go into a code enforcement revolving fund, and they would be required by ordinance to be used for code enforcement. So to the extent that the municipal court is hearing cases related to code enforcement, some of that money could be used to supplement those costs.
Okay, thank you.
So are we looking to make a decision now on paying appeals?
No, any fines and fees would be set by resolution of the city council later. We'd have to do a business impact statement. This is just bringing our code into compliance with state law so that we have a civil mechanism of enforcement for public nuisances. And it's up to the city council whether they want to act on this today. If they feel that more work is needed to be done on this ordinance draft, then we can absolutely just take that feedback and bring it back.
So today before us is becoming compliant with state law, and what happens if we don't become compliant in state law? They take us away.
Well, it's most significant with abatement. So without being compliant with state law, the city does have some
risk.
Well, we haven't been taking any abatement action. I don't think we plan to take abatement action. There's nothing that we're waiting to take abatement action on either. But we we aren't able to accomplish that process without this ordinance language.
Go ahead.
Could we tonight, though, consider that what you've put before us is pretty sound and pretty great, but if maybe the fine tweaking might be, let's keep it in-house as to not have external cost of $1,000 a case or whatever. Could we then accept this and then move forward with what you gave us for amendment number 2, which is the judge or the municipal court to be able to look at that, excluding maybe the hearing officer and putting in instead the process of going through community development and then straight to municipal court?
Yes, I think that that could be a motion made this evening. If council wished to approve the bill with the amendments presented, with the removal of any reference to hearing officers, that I think could be sufficient that we could have the ordinance approved today.
I would accept that motion.
I was just going to say that. That's awesome.
I'll make the motion, Mr. Mayor.
I'll second it.
Moved and seconded.
Well, let me state it clearly if I can, please. So, I move that we approve Bill 1967, including Amendment 2, which was given to us on the dais. And then in our discussions, we will give any additional fine tuning. That's my motion.
But also removing hearing officer.
Yeah, the motion
language
should
of hearing
say,
officer.
and also Amendment 1, because those are cleanup changes. So approve Bill 1967 with Amendments 1 and 2, and striking any provisions related to a hearing officer, allowing the second level appeal to be conducted by the Community Development Department.
That's exactly the language I meant to say. Thank you. That's my motion.
And there was a second to that.
Seconded, yes.
So moved and seconded. Any discussion? I have the simple question. Does the municipal court have the place and the time and the means to do this without increasing our costs in the municipal court area?
I spoke with Judge Miller about this potential change, and Judge Miller indicated that he felt that this would not be a significant burden upon the court.
All right, thank you. Any other discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed say nay. Motion passes unanimous. Thank you. Before we go to other business, we will take a break. And then when we come back, we'll deal with number 14.
How long's the break? I just saved my knees.
However long it takes.
We'll take a 2-day break.
come back to order. So we're on item 14, Resolution 7696. Chief, make sure your microphone's on.
On first. There it is. How's that?
Okay, thanks.
Okay. Resolution 7696 is an agreement approving the purchase and installation of a Class A burn facility for $531,971. The fire department's required to do about 200 hours, a minimum of training a year per firefighter. And that's not including medical training. That paramedic training is extra. Of this training, the insurance services, the group that rates us for our ISO rating, requires 18 hours of that to be done at a fire training facility. Historically, what Boulder City's had to do, because we don't have one, is we've used Henderson for some things. If we're going to do a live burn, we've been going to North Las Vegas because that's the nearest live burn tower. We were using the Boys and Girls Club for some things. But at the end of the day, the firefighters have really never had a dedicated place that they could train. And so this is the plan to start that process. And so the Class A burn facility is the first part of that. The capital improvement plan approved $1.2 million for the entire facility, which would include pavement, some fire hydrants, some fencing, and some props in addition to this. And so this is the purchase, or the purchase. They've got to build it, and then they'll actually come out and install it. It's a 7 to 10 month process. So I'm happy to answer any questions related to this.
Questions, please.
Question.
Go ahead.
Yes, sir.
The language talks about a fire training facility. In some interchangeable terms, it's often been referred to as a tower. Could you explain the dimensions of this facility that we're talking about?
Sure.
Please?
So ISO, again, is kind of the reference that we use, and they call for a 2-acre facility. And so that would be the plan is the tower would be in the center of that 2-acre area. There would be, a portion of it would be asphalt or concrete. We're waiting for Public Works to make that decision based on what's most cost effective and durable. And then there would be some area beyond that where we would have some water retention ponds and stuff, so the water that we use is retained in that so that it's not spreading all over the community. And then there'll be the fencing around that. So it would be 2 acres.
And further, the actual structure?
Yeah, the structure is, so each of those, they're Connex boxes. They're 8 foot by 8 foot by 40 feet. And so there's 3 of them together on the bottom, and then there's 1.5 on the second floor. So that puts us at 16 feet, and then there's a 8 foot by 10 foot rappelling tower that's attached to that. And so the footprint of it, I think, is 24 by 40 feet of the actual training tower.
So it would be within the height dimensions within our city code for
Correct.
other structures, right? So
Yeah, we were intentional. Most training towers are multiple stories tall, but most cities have tall buildings. And so we wanted to get a training tower that resembled the buildings that we have. You know, other than we respond out to Hoover Dam Lodge, other than that, we really don't have any tall buildings. So it didn't make sense for us to try to put a huge tower out there, you know, that we rarely need. So the other nice thing about this is it's a Class A burn facility, but it also offers a lot more than that. It'll allow the firefighters to be able to search it. It's got forcible entry doors. It's got sprinkler systems. It's got rappelling and different tech rescue. So they'll be able to train in this. My expectation is every week. Not burning it necessarily, but be in that training every week. I mean, they've wanted one for a long time. They need one. I support it. But I intend for those to be in it all the time. And they're excited to have it. I mean, our firefighters love to train. They just don't have anywhere to do it. I heard someone make a reference that we're out in the dirt because that's sometimes where they just have cars out in the dirt and that's where they train. But they train wherever they can. So I think it'll get a lot of use for a long time. And then it'll save us a lot of overtime. So every time we go to Henderson or Las Vegas, North Las Vegas, we don't have extra firefighters. Like a big city, it'll take 2 companies out of service, have them train, and everybody else just repositions. If we train, the duty crew doesn't train. They stay here, off-duty people train, so it's always on overtime. And that becomes very expensive when you're talking, we have 21 full-time on the floor, plus our reserves, trying to get 18 hours per person per year in North Las Vegas or Henderson. That becomes very expensive. And so this will allow us to train right next to the station with the on-duty crew and respond from the station, and it will really help us a lot.
further, please, if you could expand some conversation about high risk or low-frequency, high-risk types of calls that you'll
Sure.
be able to cover there, and the safety impact on both the firefighters and the public?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. So a lot of times, a lot of cities that run fires all the time don't spend a ton of time at the training tower because they're training every day when they're fighting the fires. Well, Boulder City with structure fires, we're fortunate that we only have 5 or 10 I've heard on a bad year. And the first year I was here, we didn't have any, which was shocking. I've never seen that in my career, but that was pretty great. But the problem with that is the firefighters don't get the frequency in there. And so that makes it a much higher risk. So when they go in to fight a fire, they don't have the familiarity with all of the tactics like they should have. So this will allow our firefighters to get into a burn building more often and to pull hoses and to spray water and to practice together so that if they're making mistakes, it's in a controlled setting at the training tower, not in a house fire when we're trying to rescue somebody or save a life. And so it really does make a big deal, and it allows them to be more effective and efficient. It's not a secret we have a really small fire department. They have to be really good, because they're doing what 2 people, and each one of them is doing what 2 people are doing over the hill. So they have to be really good, but they can't be really good if they're not training all the time. And so this will help them with that.
That's all I have, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Cody.
You explained to me yesterday about the smoke, so could you explain that to the audience out there about the smoke and how it's how it's not so strong and you have panels inside to
Yeah,
make
so
it hotter?
there's 2 kinds of burn towers or burn facilities. There's a Class A and a Class B. A Class B burns natural gas fuel. A Class A burns wood and paper. And so typically in a Class A fire, there's a small room in that training tower. The whole tower is not a burn room. There's a room in it that's got like ceramic or special heat resistant panels. And then there's a tray in the middle of that you put a pallet or 2 of wood in and light that on fire, the pallets. And so really you're talking about 1 or 2 pallets when you're talking, so something like a campfire. And so they'll light a fire, get it hot in that room, let it build heat with everything closed up. The firefighters will go inside there, experience the heat. Sometimes they're doing ventilation and they're opening windows, or this prop actually has a roof prop where we can put wood in it and they can cut the roof like they would at your house and vent the smoke up and then put the fire out. And then they repeat that evolution, but it really is a small amount of smoke. And like we talked yesterday, we don't typically train in a live burn at the towers during high wind days. NFPA 1403, I think, is a standard that regulates live burns, when you can do them, how you can do them. They're very well regulated. And so I don't anticipate the smoke from that getting over to the neighborhood. I would be shocked because, again, there are some, like there's a flashover simulator, there are some simulators where they can get a tremendous amount of heat. This isn't one of those. This is just for doing regular residential fire training.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Any other questions? I would accept a motion unless somebody else has something they wanted to say.
I move to pass resolution number 7696.
I'll second.
Moved and seconded to pass Resolution 7696. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed say nay. It's passed unanimously. Thank you. We're moving to, if you stay right there, Chief, number 15, Resolution 7697.
Yes, Resolution 7697 is a resolution accepting fiscal year 22 Assistance to Firefighters Grant in the amount of $122,031 for the purchase of 25 sets of personal protective equipment, which is the fire to close, and 10 portable radios. I want to say that these grants are extremely competitive, and about 10% are awarded annually. We've been fortunate to get 2 since I've been here, and in large part it's because Deputy Chief Chester does a really good job of writing them. And so, again, it's really hard to get 1. It's super hard to get 2. I believe it's a 95% grant, so the city has to pay 5% of it. We already have that on our budget for our equipment. This will allow us to replace 10 radios that are becoming out of compliance with the regional SNAC, which is our radio group's policies, and they're new radios. These old ones aren't going to work on them. And it also allows us to get our firefighters up to 2 sets of bunker gear, which is really important because if they go into a fire and come out, that firefighting gear off gases carcinogens constantly. And so they have to take them off at the fire, put them in a plastic bag. They can't put them in the truck ever. They take them back, they're washed, but in that meantime, they're wet. They can't put wet gear on and go back into another fire, they'll get burned. So they need to have another set. So that's why that standard calls for them to have 2 sets. So there's a lot of departments where they just take the dirty gear and go back and just wear it to the next fire. And long term, that's had really damning effects on the fire service. We've had a lot of firefighters get cancer and die in. So we're really trying to do things to change that, and this is going to help us reduce that. So
I would accept a motion.
I move to approve Resolution 7697.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Go ahead.
I just wanted to say thank you for being proactive, going out to get a grant for something like this for your needs. Thank you, Deputy Chief, for having the skill to be able to do that. Grant writing is not easy, and it's usually a long process, but this is part of the way that I know the city as a whole. We receive a lot of grants, and you're right, I've noticed that this is your second grant, so thank you. You're not only committed to a high standard of training, you're also committed to different ways to find revenue for being able to do that. So I commend you guys. Thank you. Appreciate it.
thank you.
Any other discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed say nay.
Thank you.
Unanimous. Thank you, Chief. Number 16, City Manager.
Good evening, Mayor and council members. Tonight, before you are 2 items, matters pertaining to contract terms for airport ground lease agreements expiring in 2023, 2024, and 2028. So first, we're seeking discussion and direction to confirm or modify the lease rate and extension terms based on our conversation from the last meeting. And then discussion and direction to determine assignment terms, including notice requirements as requested by Councilmember Walton. Several ground lease agreements at the airport are set to expire in the next 5 years. On July 11th, 23, the City Council provided direction on many key terms for the expiring leases. On August 8th of 2023, the City Council provided further direction on the remaining key terms of the expiring leases. The ground lease rate and extension fees need confirmation or modification to move forward with lease drafting. And then Councilmember Walton has requested to revisit the assignment fee terms. So first, I will go over what you approved for the assignment fee terms and then go over the lease rate. So on the assignment fee, it's a sliding scale based on percentage of the term left on the agreement. So there's the minimum cost of $250 if someone assigns their ground lease to another party, or it's a 20% fee if the remaining term is 10 years or more, including the option, 15% if the remaining term is 5 years but less than 10, and then a 10% fee if the remaining term is less than 5 years. There was also a 30 to 60 day notice included in that the tenant would need to provide to the airport staff. And then moving to the sublease rate and fee, staff was asked to compute an average rate, and that came out to 55 cents per square foot annually. And then the various one-time extension fees for people whose lease rates went down are attached in your packet. Council directions needed to confirm that rate and extension fee. Staff will move forward with drafting the leases for those expiring in September 1st. So I'm here for any questions you may have and here to facilitate and assist.
Councilwoman George.
Thank you. I'd like to disclose pursuant to NRS 281A that I have a commitment in a private capacity with one of the tenants impacted by this matter, Mr. Kyle Larson. My husband and I share ownership of a limited liability company with Mr. Larson. This LLC owns an airplane that is stored in Mr. Larson's hangar that is subject to one of the ground leases being discussed, and thus I have a pecuniary interest in this ground lease. Nevertheless, I've been advised by the city attorney that Nevada ethic law favors the right of a public officer to perform the duties for which the public officer was elected. And because this hangar lease would not be impacted more or less than the other leases being affected, Nevada law favors and allows my participation and action on the matters. last time I did also disclose that I did go to the Nevada Board of Ethics, and they assured me that this was something that I could also vote on. So I've done due diligence. And just clarification again is that that hangar does not belong in any way, shape, or form to the LLC. Thank you.
Thank you. Other comments?
I have a question that warrants being answered and addressed, I think, here. It might be better addressed by our city attorney, but Taylor, if you want to address it, by all means. Ensuring that we're all doing the right thing. My question is there any additional state ethics requirements beyond what has happened already in our disclosure and our contributions and expense forms, or is there any perception because of campaign contributions that's originally personal or ongoing business benefit to any of us? And is there any reason why there's anything that should be addressed in this matter?
I'll defer to the city attorney on
Thank
this one
you.
for you.
Sure, thanks, Councilman Walton. The Nevada ethics law defines conflicts of interest, and it includes things like pecuniary interests or private relationships, familial relationships, substantial and continuing business interests. Whether it requires disclosure and abstention depends on who's coming before the body. It depends on what the nature of what the item is that's being voted on. It's a very fact-intensive analysis on whether there is a conflict of interest, which I help to provide the city council. So my role is to help advise you on the Nevada ethics law. Nevada ethics law expressly excludes campaign contributions from the disclosure requirements that have been lawfully reported via C&E reports. C&E reports are the typical method by which campaign contributions are disclosed by the public, and they're readily available on the Nevada Secretary of State's website.
And if an elected member follows the law, is there any personal benefit from receiving campaign contributions from any group or individuals?
Campaign contributions are to the entity, to the committee to elect or campaign itself. Nevada law does limit the personal use, does prohibit the personal use of campaign contributions. Campaign contributions have to be spent on campaign expenses.
So within what you're saying, then there's not even any connection to a reason to disclose anything versus our participation in the matter before us tonight.
Nevada law expressly excludes it from the disclosure requirements. And so the Nevada legislature obviously had a reason for excluding lawfully reported campaign contributions from those disclosure requirements.
Thank you. I have another question, Mr. City Manager. To make sure that we're responsible with the matter before us tonight, could you please explain the concept of the enterprise account, how that impacts the airport operations, and how that reflects to the general fund, if it does or does not, and how that would potentially affect any taxpayer within the community, please?
Sure. So enterprise funds are essentially a business fund where it's self-sustaining and its revenue comes from the business activities of that fund. It's very similar to our utility enterprise fund, where the users of electric, water, wastewater, and the landfill pay their fees for the services, and then they're in that fund. It's similar with the airport. So we cannot transfer funds from an enterprise fund to the general fund. It's not allowed. It is our fiduciary responsibility. If something were to happen, we could subsidize one of those funds, but it's very unlikely. But the enterprise fund is meant to be self-sustaining and has been and should continue to be, and all of the user fees pay for the expenses.
So you say these enterprise accounts are run by fees collected, much like the utilities, water, electric, etc.
Correct. And specifically with the airport fund, the significant millions and millions of dollars that we receive in FAA grants makes up a lot of the revenue. The land leases, especially with commercial tenants, as well. And then we're also looking to diversify revenue there by opening some new areas to address shortage of hangar space. So the council authorized appraisals on a couple different parcels, I believe a month or two ago. So we're starting to have those trickle in, and once they're all in, we'll be able to come back and present those to the council to move forward with an RFP to open up some more space at the airport to further diversify our revenue.
Thank you. And I have another question in relation to this matter to make sure we're properly responsible. So we have building leases, right? Improved, where we're actually leasing a building, and then we have leases for ground. Can you elaborate on that for us, please, so we understand the difference that we're talking about in this item tonight?
Sure. And I did take note that one of the public commenters mentioned that it seems like a very complex issue, and it truly is. So we have a lot of different things at play. We have unimproved ground rates. We have improved ground rates, which means there's utilities like electric, water, things of that nature. And then we have building lease rates. So currently we are talking about improved ground lease rates because the building is the tenant's building, and so we are leasing them the improved ground. And when you look at the market study that we had our consultant Aeroplex complete, the improved ground lease rates, the average among the 10 airports that were surveyed that are very similar comparables to BVU, the average was 32 cents per square foot annually. There was a high of 45 cents and a low of 19 cents. So that's among 10 different airports that are very similar to BVU.
So if we could say that comparables essentially equate to market value, the discussion we're having tonight would be compared to those rates that you just described. And the idea, the number contemplated, at least in the report, is substantially higher, I think maybe even 40% higher than that average. Is that correct?
That's correct. I also took a look at one of the professional appraisals that we had done by Anderson Appraisals. They did mention unimproved ground rate if that property had been unimproved ground, and their price was 40 cents per square foot annually. So we are above that, more than it would cost for the utilities. So it is in line with what the one appraisal that featured that rate, and then our entire survey done by an expert third party.
Thank you. And then I think this might be my final question on this line. If, City Council chose to not renew any of the leases that are coming up in the next few years, which we're talking about right now, 111 hangars, that would mean that the city then would be responsible for owning and leasing out and potentially the maintenance, which includes staff, parts, equipment for the 111 plus the 26 we already have, right? So 137 hangars that then the city would be essentially responsible for additional buildings and all that goes along with that. Is that right?
That's correct. I will note that last year we had to rehabilitate the fire monitoring system for the city-owned hangars. That was over $100,000 expense. And then right now we're really trying to be responsive to our hangar tenants that are having maintenance issues, like the lighting system for the exterior of the hangars is not working. That's a $15,000 expense.
You're referring to the building lease people, right?
Right.
Okay.
So there is a significant cost to taking care of the hangars.
Okay. Thank you for answering those questions. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Yeah, I appreciate that because I think sometimes what gets a little confusing here is what we're talking about. First off, the enterprise fund, meaning that it has to stay within that fund and that it is for what it is for. And so we don't see community, the general community, above and beyond the airport community having to pay for the airport. It stays within that fund. So I appreciate that. Also, I appreciate the clarification because I think sometimes what we don't see, and I recognize that when I heard some of the input today, is the communication that we do have that's not up here, that's in like our discussions on our one-on-one about what to do at the airport to help it to be successful, even more successful than it already is. And I know that you have a plan. Would you give us some more information on how you put that together and what that includes?
Sure. So I am moving forward with a city manager working group to identify ways to strengthen and expand our relationships at the airport, to take a look at our weaknesses and opportunities and how to move forward and make the airport the best place that it can be.
And who are some of those stakeholders, do you mind me asking?
It varies. So we have several commercial operators, we have several general aviation folks, and then a couple people from the Airport Advisory Board that are going to sit on that, and they're very ready and willing to provide me some input on anything and everything airport.
And I very much appreciate that. I appreciate what Marissa does down at the airport. I appreciate what you've done to be able to open up dialogue. It's not always easy, and communication is the key. And I think that you work well with us and we work well with you, but there's another element of being able to work beyond what you see here. So I really appreciate that, and I know that the people at the airport will also appreciate that. Also, a reiteration of what you said as far as the rates go, that actually we are standing at above average and even the high for improved ground. So it isn't like we are charging less for what's there. Is that fair to say?
Correct.
Okay.
And one other thing on the enterprise fund, so you're familiar with our vehicle equipment replacement fund and all of our other special funds. However, enterprise funds don't use those. So that's for general fund. So any vehicles, equipment, that comes out of the enterprise fund as well. Similar with utilities.
Great, thank you. I appreciate that clarification.
I just like to say thank you, and I think a lot of what I wanted to say has already been said, but I just want to thank you for pointing out that it's the airport, the pilots, and the people that have the hangars and run their businesses out there that actually pay for it. The citizens of Boulder City don't. And so I appreciate you explaining all of that. I really, truly appreciate you taking that extra step and having this advisory group. That's, I think, important that they have the opportunity to be heard and to make our airport a better airport for the pilots out there, because I'm not a pilot, so I don't know how to make it better. They will have those answers, I think, to improve it. So thank you for sharing that and sharing and letting everybody know that they're not paying for the airport, the pilots actually are. So thank you.
Just a question procedurally, Mr. Mayor, did you want us to address item A first on this topic?
Not yet.
Okay.
So I'm going to make some observations. I'm grateful that we have people who are watching the process, and more importantly, watching us. And to clarify one of the statements, we don't do a group like this in a bubble except in front of everybody. So this is one of those where the open meeting law is we don't get in a closed room, and we are prohibited from getting quote unquote a quorum, which would be 3 people talking about how we're going to solve this. So what you see is as open town hall could be as it could be, and obviously we have open meetings with the advisory committee and pretty much on everything. But I appreciate the process that was unveiled today, that everybody knows how much everybody got from everybody, because that's the process of filing campaign contributions. And so it works. People understand, and so they can ask questions. And I'm appreciative of people who are asking questions and make sure that we're doing what we're supposed to be doing. So it made me feel good that people are aware. An enterprise fund, so let me ask the question this way. If the airport had a major problem, can the city of Boulder City step in and use its money to help alleviate the problem that the airport has? And then if it can the airport enterprise fund pay the city back?
The city could rescue the airport, so to speak, but we could not pay it back because you cannot transfer it the other way. However, our finance department and my team would not let that happen because we do operate on a cash basis here, so we are a little more flexible on how we can budget year to year. So it just comes down to the budgeting. Right now we have ample reserves to finish out some major projects that are on the horizon, like that Taxiway Bravo reconstruction, the fuel farm, and then potentially the control tower. So we have reserves for that. That's not actually, it's cash balance, not even reserves. So it's a good situation.
When is the last time the city had to bail out the enterprise fund for the airport?
Never.
So what you're saying is the property tax, the lease money, and all other revenues of the city have not had to, quote, help out the enterprise fund of the airport.
Correct.
It is separate and distinct.
Correct.
And self-sustaining.
Any of its business activities fund the entire airport, yes.
So likewise, the airport enterprise fund is not designed to make a profit.
It's not designed to make a profit, similar to our utility fund. Again, we're non-for-profit. The enterprise fund essentially delivers the highest level service possible while delivering affordable rates to the ratepayers.
And so, if I may reiterate again, we are looking at market rates, and so our rates are consistent with a market-based lease rate.
Correct, and looking at the market study that we recently undertook with 10 extremely comparable airports, we're above the average.
And we are going to have that discussion, A and B, and then we can go from there. But there's nothing being hidden. This is open books.
Mayor, I would like to address the wait list. So these 111 hangars that we're currently discussing in totality from 2023 to 2028, that's, there's 1 or 2 or 3 planes in each hangar, but each hangar definitely has 1 plane. Those planes still would need to remain at the airport no matter what happened with the hangars. So our wait list of 196 will be able to be accommodated through additional hangars at the airport. I mean, that's really the only, at the end of the day, the way to solve the wait list.
Mm-hmm. And treading on dangerous ground now, will the new hangars that we're considering doing have the same kind of deal, I'll call it, as the other hangars ground leases are?
It really depends. Best practice is to enter into a master lease with one developer who would then develop and lease the entire property and not subdivide it. So they would just write one check to the city monthly for whatever that negotiated rate is. But again, it would have to be at appraised value per our charter.
All right, appreciate it. Thank you. Any other questions of the city manager? Thank you. So we will now look at, on 16A, discussion and direction to confirm or modify the lease rate and extension terms. So, questions? Suggestions?
Mr. Mayor?
Go ahead.
So in our last council meeting, when we had the discussion about the exact lease rate, several numbers were put out there, kind of with thumbnail kind of sketch math at that time, and ultimately the direction was to find the average of all of the ground leases and go with that number. And we appreciate the spreadsheet offered in the packet from the finance department. Thank you. And they came up with 55.26 cents as our per square foot per year price. And so I suggest, as we have our conversation, that we go with that rate as we intended based on our last council meeting.
Is that a motion?
Does it require a motion?
I'd prefer a motion. Just
Okay,
for
then I will make a motion
clarity.
that the annual lease rate per square foot, as calculated, is the average of those hangars that we were discussing, 111 hangars, 55 cents rounded to the appropriate penny, whichever direction is according to professional practices with the finance department.
I'll second that.
Moved and seconded. Discussion.
Would you be willing to change your motion to include the extension fee as presented in the packet?
Sure, thank you. And without reading it verbatim, the extension fee was anybody whose rate went up, there's no extension fee. Anybody whose rate goes down, take their current price per square foot per year and subtract the 55 cents from that and multiply that by their square footage, and that is their extension fee. So that's my amended motion to include that.
And I will second that amended motion.
And any discussion? Anything else you require in that motion, sir?
No.
I will add some conversation to that, some discussion. I really believe that we're doing the right thing for the community, for the customers at the airport. There's a number of interests there. There's commercial, there's public access commercial, and there's private general aviation. And together, and in some cases, those who are transient will pay a parking fee, if you will. And all of that encompasses the stakeholders, if you will, the users, and we hope to expand that. We hopefully might see some people jumping out of an airplane with parachutes on in the near future, and add to that an additional hangar space and whatever else might be in our plan for our airport improvement plan. And that's in the totality of it. Again, as has been said many times, this particular issue is not the totality of the airport. It's a portion of the picture of the users as well as the fees that are collected. And I think truly that we've done the right thing by the community because they're not on the hook, and by the users because they have an affordable place to continue aviation. And I will comment, being a person in aviation, it's not only for the wealthy. Some people choose their discretionary income for a variety of things, and it is expensive. I always say, and I've said it from this dais, it's two things: it's time and it's money, and you have to be willing to sacrifice both to be involved in aviation. But it's truly rewarding activity, whether you prove to do it privately or commercially. And our airport is an asset. And I'm glad that our community members who are watching and contributing comments recognize that. It is a unique and an amazing airport within certainly Clark County. And we hope to keep it that way and keep it friendly to aviation. The FAA's stated purpose is to support the infrastructure of the nation's aviation. And so we want to be a part of that. And hence they offer millions of dollars in airport improvement so that the aviation infrastructure of the country is supported and enhanced. And we're an active and engaged part of that. And I think we're doing the right thing with this by all parties involved.
Thank you. Any other discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed say nay. Thank you. Unanimous. Looking at item B under 16, discussion and direction to determine assignment terms, included notice requirements.
As requested, if I might just start off the conversation.
Please.
I think at the conclusion of last meeting, we were all a little worn out by the discussion, so we failed to really dive deep into that assignment fee. Starting off at $250 and then the sliding percentage scale, really there's no comparison. If you look, and this is, again, is very informal, but talking with people at the airport from small hangars to larger hangars, we could make a conservative estimate that if somebody who is a current hangar owner were to sell the lease or assign the lease that they have, it would be valued from anywhere from $60,000 to $100,000 and maybe even much more, but we'll use those numbers. And if we look at the percentages, the 20, 15, and 10% of even, the high of $100,000, that 15% of $15,000 is, I think, beyond what our intention was as we talked about other fees associated with the airport. So after actually, doing the math on these things, it's certainly not what I intended, to have a potential fee of between $5,000 to $10,000 to $15,000 or even $20,000 just to reassign your lease if you choose to sell the hangar that you have on that ground lease. So I'm more in favor, I'll propose for our discussion, a flat fee that's more modest like the other fees we've discussed. So I'll leave that for the discussion for our group.
Other discussion?
Do you have an idea or like an amount that you would like to suggest?
Thanks. Truly, when we talked about the other fees, it's meant to cover administrative costs, at least as we talked, right? Our intent was cover administrative costs, whatever it takes to, redo, the paperwork, and whatever else is involved. I'm not entirely sure. I think we could probably bring our airport manager up here and ask if there is an administrative estimate that we have, or even the city manager could estimate that. But, we came up with $100 for the fee for subleasing. And there wasn't really any additional comments from staff about that. So I'm willing to hear from staff on what an administrative fee might equate to as fair and necessary.
Administratively, the $100 does cover processing and whatnot. The thought behind the formula sliding scale was just to prevent any appearance of revenue diversion as part of the FAA grant assurances, but as long as we have some type of fee, that's positive.
Thank you. I think it's really important to note, if we create a fee that's what I'll term exorbitant, I think we will create a behavior as a result, right? If people feel like they're being treated unfairly, then they're going to be less inclined to be transparent as a user with the airport sponsor and our airport manager. I'm not saying that's right or that it should, but oftentimes there's, when you push in one direction, you have consequences that result in behaviors that are unintended. So, while I appreciate the fact that we do need to avoid, income diversion, as the FAA might review it, we certainly don't want to create a situation where somebody might try and fudge the number they're saying they're selling or assigning their lease for so that they could pay a more reasonable fee as they view it. Again, I'm not condoning that or suggesting that we should, but sometimes as government, if there's actions that are perceived as unfair, then people kind of take it into their own hands to act in a certain way to feel like they're getting a fair shake. So I want to avoid that as well. And so I think if we bring it to a more modest set fee, we'll probably have a lot more goodwill and open communication between the users at the airport and airport management. I'm still not going to throw out a number, Matt. So
Okay. When someone sells their lease or their hangar, what's the process on our side?
Currently, we require them to come in with paperwork showing the new owner of that lease that they assigned. I suppose lessee is probably the better term for that. And then we issue new access cards and change all of their documentation with the airport, contact information, the plane tail number, type, etc.
Okay, so I think we last time we talked, $100 covers the access cards, right?
And the paperwork.
And the paperwork.
Mm-hmm.
if I might comment, there's a separate fee for your access cards. So if you have a plane down there, if you get a plane and you make an agreement to park it somewhere and you go get your access card, you're paying a separate fee. That's entirely separate. So, yeah.
I don't know about anybody else, but I've not been able to go to an attorney for $100. And I think that the attorney has to write up the new contract. And in that process, I would think it would be somewhere from $500 to $1,000 because, like I said, I've never been able to get an attorney to do anything for less than $500. So I think to rewrite a contract and to make sure everything's legal and binding, that it really should be a little bit higher than $100 for something like that because you're redoing everything. That's just my thought on it.
If I can ask a question, I'm not disputing your number, Koki, but in relation to that, the two parties involved in the exchange of the lease take care of their own writing of the contract, or do we have to give time to that with our staff?
We also do write up an amendment.
It's not an amendment, it's an assignment form.
Assignment.
And how much time does that take for you?
Typically, the airport manager drafts it. We have a form, assignment agreement that we use, but it has a lot of detail. It includes in the recitals all of the transfers so that we have a record of who, of the history of the transfers of the asset. So I'd have to defer to our airport manager as to how much time it takes, but it's not insignificant. And we review all the paperwork. We go over the ground lease with them and have them initial each page so that they understand that this is subject to a ground lease, etc.
Mr. Mayor, I'll put a figure out. 1% seems to be in the ballpark of which Councilmember Booth is talking. If it's $100,000, 1%'s $1,000. And if it's, $6,000 or $60,000, then that's $600. And 1% may be the right landing spot. So I'll put that out there for consideration.
I like that number.
Would you also be willing to have a minimum?
Well, I'm not the only one in this conversation, but I'm not opposed to it.
While you're thinking,
I would like a minimum.
while you're thinking, I think the public perception, let's call the public perception, is that we aren't supposed to make a profit in the airport fund. So we have this, we want people to use the airport appropriately, and we have a fund that the airport and we're not supposed to make a profit. And so we turn around and we have a hangar or 2 hangars or 3 hangars, or if we get a developer, for instance, that, gets more than that, and then the developer turns around and makes money as a profit for what they're doing with our nonprofit organization, that's where the public gets kind of upset. And so we, who are doing a nonprofit, give something at a very reasonable rate to the people who have a ground lease, for instance, and then that ground lease is assigned to somebody at a outside of the normal market rate that we are allowed to do. And so the public says, okay, so if you have a lease at 55 per square foot per year, and you're going to assign it at 100 per square foot per year, you're going to make a profit, you're going to double your cost or double your money. So that's where I think the public gets somewhat concerned about, are we then trying to help other people make a profit off of our nonprofit? And I may not be saying this the way it sounds, but that I think is the public's concern, is so we are righteous in saying we're not going to charge more than it takes to sustain the airport, and that's our job. The airport's not supposed to make a profit, and they're not supposed to lose money. So when somebody then takes advantage of that and makes money, that's when the public gets concerned. And, what Councilwoman Booth is talking about, the attorneys, well, my attorney is worth $400 an hour. That's what she deserves. If she were out in the real world, maybe it'd be $650. I don't know. But for me, my attorney is worth $400 an hour. And if my attorney has to review contracts, which she does, and then I say, okay, so that's more than, and that's just for our costs, not anything to do with the airport, but our costs. That's my attorney working for us, and therefore that attorney is worth more than $100. I mean, that's what you're alluding to. So that kind of thing is, if we say we're going to do something that requires my attorney involved, then that costs more, and that's just, I think, where Councilwoman Booth is coming from. And I don't know, and I will say this, I don't know that there is a way, and maybe it's done someplace elsewhere, that there is a way to balance the nonprofit and the for-profit. I don't know that there's a way to do that. And then I know we've had this discussion about revenue diversion. So if we have a for-profit taking advantage of a nonprofit, is that going to raise the flag, and I don't know this, of revenue diversion, because we should have been paying more, we should have been charging more all along if that's what the going rate was. I don't think that, I'm not smart enough to say, I don't know that there's a way to resolve that. And so I think I'm comfortable with what we're talking about with the extension fee. I think the assignment fee, if we throw in the need for attorneys, is probably closer to the 1% that you're talking about, or the $1,000 for that, and I don't know that the attorney is going to cost less for reading a $60,000 one or a $100,000 one. They don't know the difference between that contract and another contract. So I'm kind of at the 1% across the board, and then we have some way to say we did something that would capture some of that quote unquote potential revenue diversion. Go ahead.
Yeah, so if we look at that, and would you say that an hour to review on your part, something that but you will have already gone through it, right? You initially, Marissa, would be the person who processes that form? And how long would you say that takes you, please?
Good evening, Marissa Adu, the airport manager. Good evening, Marissa Adu, airport manager. The process is not short. We intake the information, go through it, make sure that the tenant is not in default of the lease. Then we put together the assignment. We send that over to the city attorney to review. Once we get that back, then we have to send that out to signature. We send that to Paul down in purchasing, and he sets that up in eSign Live, and we'll send that out electronically for signatures. And then once we get that back, then we have to update finance for billing. We update all our records. You know, there's some time that goes into it. It's not all at one time.
Yeah. Okay. So would you say that, like, let's say we did a minimum of 500, whichever was higher, the 1%, let's say we did, but minimum of 500, would that recoup those costs, do you feel?
I think about an hour of time is sufficient to review the lease history and the assignment form and ensure everything was properly.
So would 500 be a good base if we wanted a minimum, like you asked for was a minimum, right? If we said 500 minimum.
That's really the council's decision.
The idea.
To what to really value, but.
Trying to get to the bottom of the base, the minimum would be at least covering a portion of our cost or a large portion of our cost involved with that reassignment.
Yeah, I think if you look at the fee that you already established, the $100 plus the mayor's valuation of $400, that's $500, and would make sense.
Sorry, I'm sorry, the 400 coming from?
So staff time plus
Right,
processing.
so a combination of 500.
Mm-hmm.
So a minimum of 500 with a percentage of 1%, whichever is the greater, right? So the bottom line is the least amount would be 500 if 1% was below that, but 1% would be what we'd be asking.
That would work.
Is that a motion?
It was really messy. Was it a motion? Did that make sense? So yeah, with 500 minimum, but 1% being the ideal, whichever is the greater, I guess.
And I'll second that.
Is there a discussion?
I have a discussion question. If I want to add a comment on the time frame, is this the motion wherein to do that for lease assignments, or is that a separate discussion?
The discussion's open, so you can discuss the notice requirements now, and if the motion on the table wants to be amended, or you can have a vote on this motion and then discuss the motion. Notice
I'll put my
requirements.
idea out there, and then I'll let the mayor guide us. We have the notification time of between 30 and 60 days, right? Now, that's a notice of sublease, right? So that's on the agenda, right?
The council did already provide direction on 30 to 60 days on both sublease and assignment, so this is just up for discussion.
Last meeting, I tried to insert some comments on that time frame, and I was told we couldn't, and so I'm expecting tonight we can do that.
Well, yes, on subsection B, it says including notice requirements.
Okay. I just want it to be more flexible. you know, if by mutual agreement. If somebody, you know, has been in discussions and negotiations with another party and they come to an agreement that they want to execute it as quickly as reasonable on their end, that we can waive, you know, the 30 days, let them, if we can do 2 weeks, then do 2 weeks. Or if we can do a lesser time and accommodate that, rather than dragging it out. I just think if by mutual agreement, I just want to be as, you know, workable as we can with our customers. So that's the only input I had, Mr. Mayor, to add that to.
So what you're saying is within 30 to 60 days as opposed to it takes 30 to 60 days?
Well, the current language, assignment terms with 30 to 60 day notice of assignment. So if mutually we can say less than 30 days, you know, if the person comes to the airport manager and says, hey, I've got somebody, can we start this process next week or tomorrow or whatever, less than 30 days from now, and the airport manager's like, sure, why not? Let's do that. Then by mutual agreement, I just like to see us be more flexible on that rather than somebody wait that
The lease language,
2 months' time.
the lease language could say that the airport manager has discretion to waive the notice requirement required herein.
That works.
And that's already in place.
That can, leases are being drafted. We have a draft that we started based off of the last meeting. But there's time to add that language if council wishes.
Is that an amendment that you would accept?
Yes, that is. If we could include that language also, thank you.
And I accept that.
Second?
Second.
The airport manager did share with me that is possible. So,
Okay.
you know, we can accommodate anyone as quickly as possible.
So we have a motion. Would you like to restate the motion? Someone?
Certainly. The motion was 1% with a minimum fee of $500, and the 30 to 60 day requirement with waiver discretion by the airport manager if it's mutually agreed by both parties.
Moved, seconded, any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed say nay. Thank you. It has passed unanimously.
Thank you.
Thank you for your patience, everyone. And now we'll move to item 17, appointment for the Regional Flood Control District Citizen Advisory Committee. We have a name.
We do. We have one applicant, Mr. Jason Gross, and this appointment would fill an unexpired 2-year term ending February 25th, 2024.
And he has been there before and is the only one who's expressed an interest, and I would accept a motion.
I move to appoint Jason Gross as the representative to the Regional Flood Control Citizen Board.
Second.
And is there any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed say no. And we will now move to number 18, City Manager's Report, Claims Paid Report.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. This evening's City Manager Report is the claims paid for the month of July 2023. There is nothing of note, but I'm here for any questions you may have.
Any questions? Seeing none, thank you very much. And the report is accepted. And I don't need a motion on that, do I? And I will now move to public comment. Come forward, please.
Margaret Durfee, long-term resident, Boulder City. Family's been here 92 years. I see with the experience that I have in aviation, and evidently I got here a little late because I was working. the possibility of extending leases for 20 to 50 years at the rates that they're paying now. Have any of you looked at the cost of hangar leases in other airports similar to ours around the Las Vegas, Henderson area? We are giving this away. Now, I realize we are a non-for-profit, but we, me, and those of us who live here, which includes yourselves, are the taxpayers that are paying to maintain the buildings, the hangars, insure them. Have any of you paid for storage space at all in this town? I have 2 storage units in this town. One is 20 by 30. 18 months ago, it cost me $317 a month for a 20 by 30 storage. It is now $500. Okay? Going into North Las Vegas, into the Las Vegas Executive Terminal, to the Henderson, look at the cost of the leases. So what I'm seeing here is not only are we giving it away, but I feel like we're being taken advantage of. I've been in aviation for 30 years. I realize there's some gentlemen sitting back here who are probably some of the lucky recipients of these leases. When you have one plane and you have a lease for this, look what a good deal you're getting. But what if some are subletting them, which is what I am hearing? Look at the money. We're talking about bleeding out a little of this and that out of whatever fund. This is for-profit companies or individuals that are making money off of me and you and the other 15,000 residents of Boulder City, many of which do not even live in Boulder City. I see this as a blatant misuse of our property as non-for-profit has become a great profit for a lot of people. And it's not for us who are maintaining the property, for the taxpayers of Boulder City, because it is very expensive. Look at what your property taxes are. Look at what it costs to maintain and just insure your home. I'm thinking that 20 to 30-year leases at the price that we're charging is negligent on our part not to look and see what other municipalities are charging for the same amount of lease space and not allowing subletting. Subletting only allows people to make profit off of us. If there's any profit to be made, it should be made back to the city, which could be put into the infrastructure of the airport itself and the maintenance and safety of the hangars and of all the facilities. And I think that the airport manager would agree that there probably could be a great use for some more money to do those very things that wouldn't take a bond issue or us having to come up with this kind of money. This is huge in the aviation industry. Lease space, whether it is a hangar space or a gate space in the bigger airports, determines how large your airline grows, how fast your operations can grow. And so I see this as us being taken advantage of, and we need to do due diligence. I think this needs to go back for discussion. I think it needs to go into a meeting of investigation. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. We will now move to City Council's report.
We're not finished with public comments. I have some written.
You have somebody? Oh, good.
Written.
Okay.
You still have more.
So just to correct, Matt Reagan again, just to correct the record again, the average was what I think we spoke of as 32 cents. We're 40% over the market rate. So that we got to, if we could only get people to understand that. I know it's a difficult concept, but it's a ground lease and we're 40% over market rate. The other thing I'd like to address is it's kind of obvious that election season has hit us here in Boulder City. And I think of witnessing it as we saw here today, that there's shots across the bow as far as certain people who want to make it look like they want to turn something into an election issue. And I just want to point out, as far as, they're saying there's something nefarious going on with campaign contributions and that votes were bought and all this. I'd like just to add that they identified a council person who didn't accept any campaign contributions, but every single one of these votes has been unanimous. So everybody has agreed that this is, as far as a council, regardless of campaign contributions, regardless of anything, that this has been the best thing that we can do for Boulder City. And we appreciate the time that this city council has taken to examine every issue. And this has been an issue that really needs to just, it had to be resolved, and it has been for the best of Boulder City, and it's been the best of the users of Boulder City. City staff has worked tirelessly on this, and we all, I believe, Boulder City will be better off for this. Thank you.
Thank you. And a written comment?
The first public comment was submitted by Fred Volz. The small minority of Boulderites who believe they have imaginary rights to allow their dogs off leash in public places have had an outsized influence in City Council failing to implement a meaningful leash law. The needs and safety of the overwhelming majority have been inappropriately ignored to satisfy the unreasonable desires of a small minority. The unenforceable ordinance Boulder City currently has needs to go away as soon as possible. With little concern for the multiple documented attacks that continue to occur by friendly, off-leash dogs on unsuspecting people and their leash dogs, the city places itself in legal peril by the efforts of a sharp personal injury attorney who would request the city's records and establish that the problems have been well documented. Yet policymakers have taken no action to protect the canine and human population with the leash law ordinance that most other communities around the United States have had for many years, including all other municipalities in Clark County. The damages ultimately paid by local taxpayers under such a scenario will be enormous and spike our insurance premiums even further with all the other recent specious claims City Council has greenlighted. One of the justifications for taking no action before has been the dog owners have no place to run their dogs off leash. We already had one dog park and now we have two as of last week. That excuse has not been true before and it's not true today. Don't responsible dog owners have a duty to source out other places for their dogs to be off leash rather than public city parks or other public places inhabited by a wide variety of wildlife, domestic pets, and humans of all shapes, sizes, and mobility levels? The question becomes, when will Boulder City do something about this serious problem, kicking the problem down the road into the indefinite future, as has been done with the failure to implement an immediate and comprehensive plan to reduce excessive government water conservation, does our community no good. City Council exists to solve community problems, not perpetuate them, or let them become even worse than at present. Similarly, the lack of action on an animal breeding ordinance that bars the activity altogether in city limits does our community nor our animal population no favors. Some statistics from national organizations such as the ASPCA and the Human Society of the U.S. tell a grim picture. Only 1 out of every 10 dogs born will find a permanent home. Over 2.7 million dogs and cats are euthanized each year because shelters are too full and there are not enough adoptive homes. Over 7.6 million companion animals enter shelters every year in the U.S. 25% of dogs that enter local shelters are purebreds. We have no certain idea how many stray dogs and cats there are in the U.S. Only 10% of animals received by shelters are spayed or neutered, meaning the population keeps growing. Shelters and rescues throughout Greater Las Vegas are bursting at the seams with unwanted animals. Why would we want to make that problem worse by allowing backyard breeders to add to the unwanted animal population, which taxpayers and irregular charitable donations must financially deal with addressing. When will City Council move on enacting an enforceable leash law and ban on animal breeding? You have a subject matter expert in the animal shelter supervisor. Why aren't you drawing on her expertise and practical experience to take real action, not offer up empty promises? And Mr. Volz has asked that these comments be added verbatim.
Thank you.
I have one more. I'm setting the timer. The next public comment was submitted by Patrick Tregnan. Opposition to a citywide mandatory leash law. Boulder City is the second largest city in Nevada by size, but has quite a bit of desert unused by its residents. I don't believe even the proponents of a citywide mandatory leash law, many of whom don't even own dogs, are claiming that we dog owners are walking our dogs off leash in congested, high-traffic areas like downtown or crowded open spaces. This law would be going after the last remaining areas of level, grassed open spaces in our city, the parks. Currently, I cannot walk my dog even on a leash at my closest park because of the bighorns. Walking her on BLM land usually ends up giving her bloody pads from the gravel, and large areas of grass are already disappearing continuously with the seemingly endless water conservation efforts. Dogs need grass on which to walk and run safely. Although I understand the attempt with the new dog run, it is just common sense that if you concentrate all off-leash dogs in a city onto one penned hillside, the territorial instincts will kick in and there will be more dogs biting other dogs and dog owners. Anyone who has ever watched Judge Judy knows what a good number of her dog bite cases start with the phrase, "We were at the local dog run." I have been off-leash walking my golden retriever at Bicentennial Park for 11 years without incident or even witnessing an incident with any other dog. My dog does not like other dogs and does her best to avoid them. Most times I use the park, I have half or more of the park for just my dog and me. If the park is full of activity, I always use a leash. Adult dog owners should be given the latitude to make such decisions if they are warranted. Having a mandatory leash law would eliminate the freedom to make any call whatsoever. Such a law would remove the benefit of being able to consider all factors and conditions on site as adults, as we are allowed with most other decisions in our lives. Mandatory leash laws are by no means the norm in this country. Only 2 states have statewide leash laws, and existing laws, backed up by civil remedies, have worked in thousands of cities for hundreds of years. Although Nevada also does not have a statewide mandatory leash law, it does have a statewide law regulating tethering that limits the time an animal may be restrained because animals can be injured from such treatment. Animal cruelty is a felony in all 50 states, but 48 states do not have mandatory leash laws. The overwhelming majority of our country understands that it's not compassionate to have a dog restrained in every situation. Also, civil remedies have always been a great way to keep irresponsible dog owners in check. That's why insurance companies deny owners of certain breeds homeowners insurance, because many fatal dog attacks still happen with dogs that are leashed. It's not the leash, it's not the dog, and they are all different. But mandatory law treats them as if they are all equally dangerous. The police chief said at an earlier meeting about this something to the effect that the current law is like not being able to write a ticket until the accident happens. Think about that statement for a minute. If either assumes that the power to write a citation on a citizen eliminates the possibility of that person ever having a future accident, or that everyone has ever received a traffic violation will eventually be involved in an accident, neither are true. What a mandatory leash law would truly do is give a police officer the power to charge a person who has done nothing more than walking with a mild-mannered dog in an empty park. Laws should not be written with the assumptions that they will not be used in all cases. Mandatory is no exception position. Comparing a leash law to traffic laws is hyperbole anyway. 43,000 people die from traffic accidents each year. 16 die from dog attacks. 66 of those fatal dog attacks are caused by pit bull breed. 0% are caused by Pekingese. However, a mandatory law removes the ability to discriminate between the capability of a dog to be dangerous. The NIH data shows that you are 23 times more likely to visit an emergency room because of a fall than from a dog bite. even though almost half of American homes have a dog. Dog bites are a problem, but not such a pressing problem that we should just throw out the freedom that most Americans still hold dear. There would need to be a reasonable distance allowed before charging a dog owner in any mandatory law to ensure fairness to everyone involved, and the almost half of the population that owns dogs that need freedom in open spaces. If a dog owner maintains a 30-foot distance from any other person or animal when the dog is off leash, there is no one that can say that anyone is being harmed or bothered. I achieve that on most days I walk my dog already and know in advance when it's time to put the dog on her leash. I'll finish, it's almost done. The collective punishment of all dogs to punish a few, sometimes out-of-control dogs, cannot be the answer. A mandatory leash law would create a local world with no fetch, no frisbee catch, no zoomies, and no dogs allowed to obediently walk alongside of their owners, except for one Penn Hillside area in the second largest city in Nevada. That ends my written public comments.
Thank you. We'll go to City Council's report, starting with Councilwoman Booth.
I want to say thank you to our city manager and the streets department. I went by Adams and Buchanan today when school was letting out and the crossing guards were taking the students across and the lights were flashing. So thank you for getting those up so fast. I really appreciate it. I know all the parents do. So that was a great job. Thank you.
Nothing to report.
Go ahead, Councilman.
Thank you. I just like to, comment that serving on city council does require a great degree of study, research, conferring with other people in other communities, conferring with staff as appropriate, guided by the open meeting law and our one-on-one meetings with the city manager. And to infer that our city council members individually or collectively are not familiar with the details of the matters at hand, or that we haven't properly discussed as we appropriately can, is just misguided. And I've spent many hours on item 16 alone. And then add all the others. I think I appreciate those that recognize the sacrifice and the efforts involved in serving. I appreciate serving with this council, and our staff is amazing in helping us. And we truly do communicate the absolute best we can within the constraints that we have. And again, I'll express thank you to all who submit comments, all who show up to give comments, all who reach out. I'll reiterate that I respond to every email that I receive and include the invitation to meet personally in my response, and that stands. And I look forward to meeting with many more people on whatever the issues are that they have concerns or seek clarifications for. I don't have any other specific updates, Mr. Mayor. That concludes my comments.
Thank you.
Thank you. I too would state that that is true for myself, that I am happy to answer and to meet in person. But also in the last 2 weeks, I had the opportunity to go to the Boulder City Museum and Historical Association board meeting. And they had donated to them the Fenton House, and we are getting closer. They're getting closer to be able to have the funds to bring that up to its original historic shape. And that'll be exciting because it'll give us an opportunity to see what one of those homes that were the backbone for the people who came here would look like. So that's exciting. I also had the chance to cut the leash at the dog park with the mayor. There were four-legged friends, two-legged friends, lots of people in the city who worked hard and who live in the city who worked hard to be able to provide that. Today I was walking with my daughter around the duck pond, peeked in, saw 2 people just sitting on chairs with their dogs and enjoying the opportunity to have that facility. And it made me happy to think that that was available for them. Also had an opportunity to attend Nevada League of Cities for a short time, and that was informative and nice. Attended with the mayor and also with Taylor, city manager Taylor Tedder. So a little bit of what I've been doing. Thank you.
Thank you. Along that same line, Boulder City and Glenn Levitt is now the executive director of the Nevada League of Cities and Municipalities in the state of Nevada. I am grateful for what the flood district has done these many years and the people who have been involved with it, because it worked. We filled up flood basins and then we drained them, and so many people were saved a lot of challenges. Our hearts go out to Mount Charleston folks, and obviously our hearts are still mourning many of the people in Maui, and we have many things that have happened in the world, and how blessed we are to live in Boulder City. With that, the meeting's adjourned.